Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Deku Ran an Orphanage. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really helps me out. I did not write the story. The original writer is Kyodon. Please go support them. Now let us dive in. You seem like you're in a good mood today, Izuku. Achiko pointed out as the two of them walked through the house's halls down to the first floor. Am I? Well, I guess that makes sense. Izuku admitted with a big smile on his face. Sori was discharged from the hospital and Sai got all of her things together, both of them are coming in today. So I finally have some security besides the Grim and you guys. No offense to you guys, of course. None taken. After seeing what Sori did to the Grim, it puts into perspective how much progress we still have to make to get anywhere near that level. Achiko looked down and suddenly her smile became a bit strained. Izuku's own smile dipped as he knew exactly what she was feeling. The feeling of inadequacy. He smiled at her. Well, you're going to be far stronger than her one day. So don't worry. You'll get there. That did make Achiko feel better for a moment, and she smiled back at him before she recalled something. Then you're going to become the #1 hero. Because you'll be able to do those things faster and better than everyone else. Achiko couldn't help but remember Yanda's words when she heard Izuku say that. The way he said she'd get stronger than Sori, it was more like a foregone conclusion. She had one for all, for it wasn't really a question if she could get stronger than her. Because no matter how much Sori worked or trained, she'd never reach the output of one for all. And she couldn't help but feel a bit bad. But she quickly shook her head, ridding herself of those thoughts. Right now was not the time to be thinking about that. She didn't want to ruin Izuku's mood after all. Right, thanks. Achiko smiled back at him. Alright, hopefully when they get here, things will calm down in terms of unwanted violence, Izuku said. What on earth happened? Izuku shouted in shock as he stared at the scene in front of him. Izuku was on the path that headed towards the facility, and in front of him was just a burnt battleground, covered in craters and fire. And in the middle of it all was Sori standing over Sai with a foot on her throat. The two of them were covered in cuts, burns, and bruises, their clothes torn and dirted. Oh hey boss. Sori finally noticed Izuku's presence and gave him a big grin. Sori here, reporting for duty. Is that seriously the first thing you're going to say to him after all this? Sai groaned as she attempted to push Sori off of her. And would you please remove your foot from my throat? Izuku facepalmed as Sori moved off of Sai and Sai got off the ground and dusted off her suit. Please just, what happened? Oh, funny story. Sori started, getting ready to explain everything. You see, a little less than an hour ago, Sai was walking down the main path towards the facility, with her bag full of her belongings in hand. She didn't have much. The HPSC made sure of that, but at least that meant she didn't have to deal with moving a bunch of bags around. As she was walking down the dirt road, she stopped and her eyes narrowed. Something's approaching me. Sai then opened a gate behind her, and a blunt sword flew out of it, just in time as Sori had lunged at her from behind and was about to grab her, but the sword hit her in the chin and caused her to go fly back. Oh.
Shit.
Sori said as she rolled backward, landing on her toes. Damn, that hurt. Sai didn't give her time to recover, and Sori became surrounded by portals from every angle, with the tips of swords jutting out of them threateningly. Oh wow, that's a pretty neat quirk you got there, Sori said, looking around at the swords. Who are you, and what is your business with me? Sai asked her in a harsh and strict tone, delivering an intense glare towards the cat girl. Well, you see, I'm this place's guard. So it's kinda my job to stop suspicious people from just walking up the house. Sori explained casually, not at all fazed by the weapons surrounding her. Wait. You're the other guard Midoriya hired. Sai realized as she recalled Izuku talking about Sori during their meeting. Your name is Sori if I recall. Oh, so you're my partner. Sword girl. Sori said, realizing her mistake. Would you look at that? Damn, I need to stop instantly attacking things in this place. Always end up doing something I shouldn't. You should probably stop instantly attacking people in general, Sai told her, deactivating her quirk. Hey, I didn't say we were done fighting. Sori frowned, getting into a lunging stance. Sai just gave her a bewildered look.
I what?
I want to know just how capable my partner is, Sori explained with a savage grin on her face, her tail moving side to side in anticipation. Also, I've been stuck in the hospital for like a month and now I finally get the chance to fight someone strong? No way in hell am I letting a chance like this go. Now get ready. Sai took a quick look at Sori and knew she wasn't gonna back down. Fine. But you're taking responsibility for this.
Here we go.
Sori lunged at Sai, moving at speeds her opponent had no hope of reacting to. Fortunately, she didn't have to. Kaboom! Suddenly a massive explosion erupted from the ground, hitting both of them and knocking them both back. Sai knew she couldn't keep up with Sori's speed. And at the distance the two were at, she'd need to do something drastic, otherwise, she'd lose instantly. So she created a portal underground and shot an explosive sword out of it.
Eck!
Sori was launched back and sent rolling across the dirt. Meanwhile, Sai was also sent flying back, but since she was prepared for the explosion, she was able to flip back and land on all fours. The former hero didn't give Sori any time to rest and created more portals in front of her. Sori jumped backward, and as the sword shot out of her, she curled into a ball midair, dodging the first set of swords before falling back and landing on her feet, before dashing forward. Sai shot out more swords at her, but Sai jumped over them, leaping into the air before she started hurtling down at Sai. But Sai opened up portals behind and in front of Sori as she was falling and shot out lots of swords at her from both sides. In response, when the swords got close, Sori spun around and kicked away most of the swords coming at her and grabbed two of the others. But that was only a distraction, the swords coming directly at her weren't the threat, no. It was the swords around her that were the threat. Because those swords hit each other and then... kaboom! They detonated, creating a massive explosion that engulfed Sori completely. Egg! Sori was spat out of the black cloud that was created from the explosion, hitting the ground close to Sai before rolling across it behind her. She quickly used her claws to dig into the dirt, to regain her footing and stop herself from moving much further. However, the moment she stopped, Sai surrounded her with portals, with blades aimed at her from all angles. Ready to give up? Sai asked her sternly. Sori stood up and cracked her neck before giving her a huge grin. Not on your life. I'm just getting warmed up. Very well. Sai acknowledged her resolve. Be ready. And then the swords closed in on Sori. And after that things got out of hand. Sai sighed, shaking her head in shame. What are you talking about? That was awesome. Sori argued enthusiastically. I apologize for the mess, sir. Sai gave Izuku a bow. I shouldn't have allowed things to progress this far. It's fine. Izuku shook his head and sighed as he tried to look on the bright side. At least now you know each other's capabilities. That's a plus, I guess. That's it, boss. Just keep looking up. Sori said, walking up to Izuku and patting him on the back. Now let's get going. I want to grab some grub. Sai was about to admonish her for her lack of grace or tact, but she was cut off when her stomach started growling. Grrrr. The former hero's face instantly went red, and she turned to Izuku with her head held low. I would also appreciate it if we could get something to eat. Please. After a short trip to the facility, they finally reached the front gate of the house. All right, I already have some food ready for the two of you, Izuku told them as he opened the gate using his phone. We can just go inside and dash. Before Izuku could finish his sentence, two things happened. First was that Sori jumped backward, third was that Sai grabbed Izuku and pushed him behind her, and third was that Kiba crashed into the ground where Sori had been standing. Nice try, wait. Lady Kiba. Sori gasped when she realized who had been attacking her, and her eyes sparkled with amazement. Indeed. It is I. Kiba. Kiba announced, holding her head up high and putting her hands on her hips. The great and powerful Queen of Eternal Darkness. And you are one of my minions, correct? Of course, Lady Kiba. I've come to serve you and the Midoriya clan as well as I can. Sori shouted enthusiastically. By beating the crap out of any idiots who'd wanna punch ya. Kiba nodded. Good, good. However, I can't simply ignore that you broke onto the grounds of my fortress, killed several of my monsters, destroyed my property, and scared my siblings and caretaker. Sori winced and rubbed the back of her head. Yeah. Not my brightest moment. And since you are one of my subjects, it falls to me to punish you for your misbehavior. Kiba punched her palm and stared down Sori with a vicious grin on her face. Now prepare yourself for a queen's punishment. However, before the fight could start, Kiba turned to Izuku. I apologize for the scare, caretaker. I hope you don't mind me sparing with our new guard. I don't, but next time, don't come crashing from the sky, Izuku told her, before looking at Sori sternly. And Sori, no using your claws. I don't want my daughter bleeding all over the lawn.
Got it, sir.
Sori said, giving him a thumbs up. All right, you two have fun, Izuku told them. And that's when the fight really started. Kiba did a lightning-fast jump kick, launching herself at Sori's face, only for the feline woman to duck backward, and as Kiba sailed over her, Sori grabbed the back of her dress. She quickly stood up and started spinning around, before tossing Kiba into the forest and leaping after her. Is this truly a wise decision? Sai asked, sounding a bit concerned. Honestly, Sori's fight with you was proof enough that she can hold back in a fight. After all, to have a few injuries as you do despite having no enhanced durability has to say something. Izuku said. TCH. Sai looked away in embarrassment. All right, I'll send one of the UA students to go watch over them. For now, let's get you something to eat, Izuku told her. And then Sai perked up. At once, sir. Saibura, the former pro-hero turned guard, was currently scarfing down a stupid amount of food on a table in the cafeteria. Right now she was snacking on a rack of ribs, but she also had a beef bowl next to that, some meat skewers next to that, a bowl of rice, and a cooked chicken. As well as a few stacks of plates surrounding her. Dude, where does it all go? Kaminari asked Sato, the two of them being a table away, looking at Sai in shock and awe. I have no idea. Apparently, blonde girls have the ability to eat forever. Sato said as he looked over to Amai sitting at the same table, eating a similar amount of food together with Yami. I'll have to keep that in mind, Kaminari said, making a mental note of that. While the two were chatting, Momo and Ida came into the cafeteria and walked up to Sai. Please forgive us for interrupting your meal, but we'd like to speak with you about something, Ida told her as they approached. MJRRR. Sai sighed, her annoyance clear to all, even though she had a mouthful of pork. She knew that the 1A students would speak to her sooner or later, most likely sooner given they were leaving the day after tomorrow, but did it have to be while she was eating? After swallowing her food and reining herself in, Sai turned toward the pair and gave them the most neutral expression she could muster.
What is it?
Well, we were wondering, since you were a pro-hero, if you could give us any personal advice or something of that level? Momo asked her polity. Yeah, that was about what Sai anticipated. It was either this or them asking about why she retired, so she's thankful it was the former rather than the latter. I suppose that's a fair thing to ask, Sai responded. Very well, tell everyone to gather in the training room in an hour. Once I'm done eating. Thank you, Ms. Bura. My class will do everything we can to learn from your wisdom. Ida assured her, giving her repeated respectful bows. And I'll everything I can to teach you, even with such limited time, Sai told him, before turning her attention back to her meal. Now if you excuse me. I would like to finish eating. The two didn't even get to respond before Sai started digging in. Why do I have a bad feeling about this? Kaminari asked. After some time, all of 1A gathered in the training room, with Sai standing in front of them, her arms crossed behind her back. Can anyone tell me, what's the most important part of being a hero? Sai asked them. Defeating villains? Todoroki answered. Minimizing casualties? Achiko answered.
Not dying?
Mineta answered. Correct. All of you. Sai told them. In truth, there is no one answer to that question. In my mind, a hero's first priority should be saving and protecting the innocent at any cost. Even their own lives. However, I can't act like all heroes are willing to do that. Some heroes simply aren't willing to pay that price, others are only heroes for fame and glory, and while I have an issue calling those people heroes, there is little I can do about it, so I must acknowledge those goals as well. But something that should be highly prioritized no matter what your goal is, something that should be a high priority for all of you, is staying alive. Which is what I'm going to try and teach you. I will be fighting you each, one by one, and will tell each one of you what your most fatal flaw is. Any questions? You're not gonna stab us, right? Mineta asked nervously, his face going white at the thought of facing Sai's many blades. That and so much worse, Sai said ominously. But as they say, no pain, no gain. And I think you'll find being stabbed much preferred to being killed. And if not, I would highly suggest you change careers. Now, any other questions? Almost everyone raised their hands. Sai sighed. I can already tell I'm going to spend my whole day doing this. Sai and Aoyama stood on opposite sides of the training room, with the rest of 1A on the side watching them. Alright, you can begin, Sai told him, giving Aoyama permission to attack.
Oui.
Aoyama said, before shooting his naval laser at Sai. Only for Sai to drop a sword that looked to be made of some kind of glass or crystal in front of her, causing the laser to deflect into the wall. Oh, je vais mourir putain. Aoyama responded, his eyes widened in fear. Then portals opened up around Aoyama, surrounding him. Aoyama looked around and froze in fear as he saw the swords begin to emerge. Kaboom! The swords exploded on impact, engulfing Aoyama in a massive blast. Is he gonna be okay? Mina whispered over to Momo, both of them looking nervously at the smoke cloud that hit Aoyama. I'm sure she wouldn't do anything to harm us unnecessarily, Momo reassured her, although she didn't sound too sure herself. Eventually, the smoke cleared, revealing Aoyama on the ground, covered in burns and soot. Et pourtant je vis. Malheureusement.
Where to begin?
Sai asked herself as she shook her head in disappointment. A crucial lesson you all must learn is to control your fear. Fear is the #1 cause of death for new heroes and sidekicks. After witnessing this match, can anyone tell me why that is? Tsu raised her hand. Because it shows the enemy their opponent can't beat them and causes you to freeze? That's correct. Fear, more than anything else, will be your biggest hurdle to overcome. Sai told them. And what if you're not afraid of the villains? Shoto asked. Then you're an idiot, Sai answered harshly, glaring at Shoto. Fear is absolutely necessary for a hero. Because without it, you become overconfident. And overconfidence is the #2 cause of death for new heroes and sidekicks. Quirks are varied and dangerous. You could go on to try and arrest a group of teenagers mugging an old lady, and then suddenly one of them shoots lasers out of their eyes, and because you were so confident they wouldn't be a threat, you can't dodge it in time and lose your head. Fear is something you must manage, keep it at a healthy level. To where you have a healthy level of caution without ever allowing it to overwhelm you. This is, of course, easier said than done, and most comes with experience rather than being taught. Still, sparring matches are a good way to help train your fear management skills and increase your reaction time. Sai looked back at Aoyama, who was pulling himself onto the ground. Your second biggest issue was your lack of mobility. I could tell by your stance that your plan was to just fire at me without moving. Like a turret. This is a bad strategy against me, especially considering I can attack you from literally anywhere, but in general, that's not a good tactic. There are situations in which not moving while fortifying your position is the best or only way, but most of the time you at the very least have to be ready to move. I left several openings for you to escape there, but even if you hadn't frozen in fear, you wouldn't have been able to escape the attack in time because you weren't ready to dodge. Just because your quirk doesn't assist with mobility, doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how to dodge. At this point, Aoyama's face was red with embarrassment. Oui. I understand. I will strive to improve, Madame Bura. I hope so, because if you fight villains in your current state, you are going to die, Sai told him bluntly, before looking to the rest of the class. Let's move on. It was Mina's turn, and now she was staring down Sai with a grin full of false confidence. You may begin, Sai told her. Instantly, Mina started sliding toward Sai in her acid. Sai made a wall of portals in front of her and shot out a lot of blunt swords at Mina.
I don't think so.
Mina let out a wave of acid in front of her and dissolved the swords before they could hit her, allowing her to get through. Surprisingly, Sai didn't send any more swords, allowing Mina to get close.
Ivegotra.
Mina shouted as she got ready to punch Sai in the face. However, when she threw her punch, all she hit was the side of another sword that came out of a portal Sai spawned in front of her. An electrified sword. Garagil Sakiowiowich. Mina cried out in pain as the electricity flowed out from the sword and into her body. Her hair flew up, her body convulsed and spazzed, and burn marks started appearing on her skin. After a few seconds, Sai pulled the sword back into the portal, cutting off the flow of electricity to Mina's body. Ow! Mina fell onto her back, smoke coming off of her well-done body. Can anyone tell me where she went wrong? Sai asked, turning her attention to the class. She announced that she was going to attack you like an idiot? Jiro pointed out.
Hey!
Mina picked herself up and gave Jiro an angry pout. Correct. If you have to announce your attack like to say your special attack name, then do it, while your attack is in the midst of landing, not before you attack, while the villain can still dodge it. Sai explained. Also dash. Sai made a portal above Mina's acid trail and shot out an electrified sword into it, and everyone watched as the trail lit up, lightning sparking off of it. Always be careful when standing in or making a trail of liquid, Sai said, looking at Mina's horrified face. Never know when you could get shocked by a villain with an electricity quirk or just an exposed wire. Allah, keep that in mind, Mina told her, chuckling nervously. Now it was Ajui's time. Tsu was in a crouched position, ready to leap at a moment's notice. All right, begin, Sai told her. Tsu jumped up into the air and was immediately surrounded by dozen portals. Kaboom! Exploding swords hit her and Tsu fell out of the cloud, smoking.
Oh. Carol.
Well, that fast, a Kaminari noted. I know you're a frog, but it's dangerous to rely on jumping, Sai told her. Being in the air leaves you vulnerable to attack. You can't dodge and you can only move in one direction. Not to mention, if you tend to jump often, your opponents can easily predict what you're going to do and catch you in the air. Plus, if you have a frog quirk, the first thing your enemy will expect you to do is jump.
That's fair. Carol.
Tsu croaked. All right, next student, Sai told them. Now it was time for the class rep, Ida, to take to the battlefield. Ida was in a running stance, ready to go when Sai gave the order. All right, I'll run as fast as I can, before she can overwhelm me, I'll kick her. Ida thought to himself as he got ready to fight. Go, Sai ordered. Ida then proceeded to run 2 feet in front of him, before his foot fell through a portal Sai opened, causing him to trip and fall on his face. Sai then opened a bunch of portals above Ida and shot exploding swords out of them. Kaboom! Was that strictly necessary? Momo asked, wincing at what happened to Ida. Wasn't trapping him in the ground enough? Enough to win the battle, yes. Enough to keep this lesson in his memory, maybe. But just to make sure, I might as well hammer the point in. Sai explained. Speaking of the point, Ida, do understand why you failed so quickly? Was my attack predictable? Ugh. Ida groaned as he recovered from the explosion. Very good. I could see the gears turning in your head, and yet your strategy was just, run at me in a straight line really fast and kick me in the head. Sai told him bluntly. Given your quirk, that is literally the most predictable strategy you could have gone with. Remember, not all villains are idiots, and you are all going to be public figures, meaning they're going to know your quirk in advance, so they'll likely figure you out completely if you don't mix up your strategies. Lastly, watch your step. Your quirk is very reliant on the terrain you're running on, so any opponent of yours is going to want to mess with the ground in order to defeat you. I understand. I will take this lesson to heart. Thank you for imparting your wisdom on me. Ida said, getting up and bowing to her. You're welcome, Sai said, a little off-put by his appreciation despite her blowing him up. Next. Now it was Achiko's time and she was nervous as can be. She stood on the opposite side of the room, in a battle stance, sweat rolling down her face, as she wondered how painful this was going to be. All right, let's begin. Sai signaled. Achiko wasted no time. 18%. Immediately she dashed right at Sai, however, she didn't make the same mistake as Ida. She watched her step carefully. Sai had made a few portals in the floor, to try and trip her up, but Achiko skillfully avoided them as she quickly ran at Sai. At least they're learning. Sai thought as she let Achiko approach her. All right, I'll make it look like I'm trying to attack her from the front, then I'll circle around her and attack her from behind. Achiko's train of thought was suddenly disrupted when Sai rushed forward and kicked her to the ground. Ack! When Achiko looked back up, she saw numerous portals opened above her, with swords aimed down at her. Kaboom! Explosive swords slammed into Achiko, engulfing her in a huge blast. Remember what I said, expectations? Sai asked the class. You've already seen the disadvantages in playing into a foe's expectations, but this the advantage of setting an expectation and defying it. Well, I definitely didn't expect that. Achiko groaned. I'm willing to bet none of you would have. Sai continued. After all, I've spent all the previous battles standing completely still and only using my quirk. I conditioned you to think only about my quirk, and so you completely overlooked the possibility of me just punching or kicking you. Which is another thing, sometimes you don't always need to rely on your quirk. Basic punches and kicks, or even using weapons or tools in the environment, can prove effective against certain foes. Now, onto the next foe. And so the lesson, ass beatings, went on, with Sai utterly destroying 1A and poking at their most damning flaws. Kaminari lacked staying power and needed to find a way to stop short-circuiting his own brain. Kirishima and Sato had an issue in that both lacked mobility, meaning they could be easily trapped or just kept at bay. Shoji made himself too big a target. Jiro was very reliant on her support gear. Shiro was reliant on his environment. Tokoyami, aside from having little to defense against light, was left defenseless when Dark Shadow strayed too far away from him, making it harder to defend against multiple opponents or opponents that could attack from multiple angles. Todoroki's ice blocked his field of vision, giving his opponents the chance to pull something sneaky. He was also too reliant on brute-forcing his way through situations using his overwhelming power. Shinso relied too much on stealth and had little in the ways of actually fighting someone without his quirk. Mineta was too cowardly and it left a lot of openings. Momo was very indecisive. Ojiro and Toru, funny enough, got the least amount of criticism, with Sai telling them they were doing just fine. They just lacked power, which wasn't their fault, nor could they do much to fix that situation. They could only really improve on what their areas of expertise were. And by the end of the day, Class 1A was left lying on the floor, exhausted and covered in burns. Meanwhile, Sai was standing on the side, looking a bit winded and drinking an energy drink, all the portals she opened having made her a bit tired. Honestly, not as bad as I thought. Too strong. Mineta groaned. I can't believe she lost to that cat girl. Sai shot him a mean glare that caused Mineta to freeze. As heroes, you're going to have to find that certain heroes have types of villains they go well against and some they do poorly against. Sometimes regardless of skill. Sai explained, sounding very, very annoyed. My quirk does poorly against foes with high mobility. And mobility is something Sori excels at. Not to mention her enhanced senses making it easy for her to keep track of my portals. She's a powerful and surprisingly skilled fighter, with an advantage against me, so I wouldn't say her narrow victory against me was surprising. Perhaps you'd like to see an up-close demonstration of her skills? I'm sure she'd be more than happy to show you them.
No. No. I'm good.
Mineta shouted in fear. Yeah, we saw enough of them, we're good. Shiro agreed. Please have mercy. Kaminari begged. That's what I thought, Sai smirked. I'll leave you with this, as tempting as it is to focus on coming up with new techniques and strengthening your quirks, none of that will help you if a villain exploits your weaknesses and kills you 5 seconds into the battle. Work with each other, don't avoid sparing matches against people you know you can't beat, because even if you can't win, you may learn something. With that, Sai exited, leaving the students to linger on her words. For all of 5 seconds. Hey class reps, before you sign us up for an ass-kicking, can you at least warn us first? Shiro groaned. Noted, Ida replied. Ugh. Kiba groaned as she opened up her eyes. She quickly recognized that she was in the medwing, having been here quite often. What, how did I alright? Sorry. Kiba grimaced as she recalled how she got here. Her fight with the cat woman had been quick. Both in that, the two of them moved at extremely high speeds, and in that, it didn't last very long. She felt frustration well up inside her, her fist clenching and her face contorting into a pout. Her losing wasn't the worst part. She knew how strong she was, so just losing wouldn't have stung that badly. But she didn't just lose. She didn't land a single hit on her. No matter how she attacked, Sori would just dodge or redirect or interrupt her attacks and counter with an attack of her own. And she hit where it hurt. Something Kiba recalled clearly, as even now her body ached in the spots where Sori had struck her. Ugh. Kiba groaned as she shook her head, trying to free herself of her frustration. I can't be petty. I lost because I lacked skill. I just need to improve and then I'll beat her. Kiba, are you awake? Kiba looked to the side of her bed and saw Eri looking at her with a concerned expression. You really need to be more careful, you can't keep ending back up here. Eri lightly scolded her while checking her bandages. Eri had taken to patching up the other kids in the medbay after their fights, as such she had tended to Kiba many, many times. Maybe I just like seeing my favorite unicorn? Kiba remarked, giving Eri a cheeky grin. In response, Eri gave her a stern frown. Fine, I will be more cautious. Kiba pouted, looking away from Eri in shame, as both of them knew this song and dance well. Please, please do, Gary begged her, before looking over her wounds again. Everything looks okay, I think you should be able to go now. Dinner should be ready soon. But before you go, drink this. Eri turned around and grabbed a thermos that was on a desk next to her, before handing it to Kiba. "More blood?" Kiba asked, opening it up and looking inside to see the red, thick liquid inside. However, when she gave it a sniff, she could tell something was off. "Why does it smell so sweet?" "It's my blood," Gary told her, with an uncomfortable and slightly disgusted expression on her face. Kiba froze, and her face somehow got even paler.
What?
"It's my blood," Gary repeated, looking away from her. "I want you to drink it." There was a long stretch of very uncomfortable silence between the two, as Kiba was too stunned to respond and Eri didn't have anything else to say. Eventually, Kiba managed to compose herself enough to ask the question that was on her mind. "Eri, why do you want me to drink your blood?" "Well, Izuku said if you keep getting hurt, you might get permanent injuries. Drinking my blood helps prevent permanent injuries." Eri explained. "It also slows down aging, helps your immune system, and a lot of other good things." "Your blood does all that?" Kiba shouted in shock, looking over Eri's body in disbelief. "You really are a unicorn." Eri nodded. "It's why people want it so badly. Izuku says I have to be careful. People are always going to be after my blood, so I have careful." Kiba kept looking at her, all sorts of emotions rushing through her at once. All that power in such a small, fragile body. And Kiba knew exactly what someone would do to get it, someone like Overhaul. Just thinking about him sent a pang of white-hot rage through her body. Rage and fear. "I promised no one would hurt you," Kiba reminded her solemnly. "Never, never again." "I know. But please don't kill anyone," Eri asked her, giving her a strained smile. "And please drink it. I'm worried about you." Kiba looked down at the blood. Normally she'd just scarf it down. Enjoy the flavor. But this wasn't just any blood. It was Eri's blood. This was the stuff that ruined Eri's life. This was the stuff that would cause who knows how many people to come after Eri, to try and do the same stuff Overhaul did. It smelled so sweet, but Kiba couldn't find it anything but utterly disgusting. But saying that to Eri after she went through the trouble of getting this for her, was likely not the smartest move. And so Kiba sucked it up and brought the cup to her mouth. Eri's blood had a unique taste to it. One that Kiba could only describe as very Eri-like. It was sweeter than any blood she tasted before, but there was also this unidentifiable flavor to it. Something she'd never tasted before. A shame, Kiba would have liked it if it hadn't caused Eri so much pain. Once Kiba finished scarfing it down, she looked at Eri. "They're done." It was very bloody. Eri gave her a confused look and Kiba's face turned red with embarrassment. "Bloody? Really? Out of all the things I could have said, bloody?" Kiba internally facepalmed. At first, she wanted to say it tasted good, but she was unsure if that was the wrong thing to say, but she wasn't sure if saying it tasted bad was the wrong thing to say, so she ended up saying that. "Well, I'm famished. So I think I'll be heading to dinner, thanks for the checkup, bye." Kiba shouted as she bolted off the bed and ran out of the room. Eri looked on as Kiba fled, before looking down at her arm. "I hope that helps." After dinner, Kiba decided to go to her room and play some superhero bash. Currently, Kiba was playing against the CPU, readying herself to take on some opponents online. "Knock knock." "Kiba? Can I come in?" Izuku asked from outside. Immediately, Kiba paused her game and responded. "You may enter." Izuku came in and immediately started looking over Kiba, with a worried look in his eye. "I see you've recovered enough." "Of course. No battle could ever keep me down for long," Kiba stated confidently. "So what brings you here so late at night, caretaker?" "Well, I just wanted to check up on you and make sure you're okay," Izuku explained, giving her a comforting smile. "Do you need anything? A drink, food? Anything?" Kiba was about to say no when suddenly an idea came into her head. "No, I can't ask for that. Daddy needs his sleep, I can't ask him to, but it's been so long." "Well, caretaker, it has been a while since we played games together." Kiba's face was bright red from embarrassment and shame, and she had to look away from Izuku while she talked. "So, if you're not too tired, actually forget about it. I'm sure you've been working hard all day and need your rest. Excuse my selfish request, dash." Plop. Kiba suddenly felt the couch sag next to her, and she looked over to see Izuku had sat down next to her. "So, where's the controller?" Izuku asked. "Wait, caretaker, you should rest." I will not allow you to overwork yourself for my sake again. Kiba protested, pouting heavily at her adopted father. Izuku shook his head.
It's fine.
Uraraka's been making sure I don't work too much while they're here. And besides, playing games with you isn't work.
It's fun.
Kiba turned away to hide the huge grin that uncontrollably grew on her face in response. Well then I guess I have no choice. Prepare to feel my wrath. The next few hours of the night were spent playing games and discussing common interests. Mainly heroes. So then Edshot literally went through the entire base and knocked out 50 men in 6 seconds. Before they could even think about shooting the hostages. Izuku said as he continued playing, using Miriko to fight against Kiba's character, who happened to be Edshot.
That's astounding.
Kiba said, half amazed and half frustrated. Now if only he could do that here. Well, that would be a bit unfair, don't you think? Izuku laughed. I don't want to hear that from an All Might main. Kiba said, sticking her tongue out at him. Well, you've got me there. Izuku chuckled. They continued playing for a few more seconds before Edshot managed to stun Mirko and then knock her off the stage.
Game. I did it. I won.
Kiba cheered, jumping up and throwing her hands up in celebration. I let my guard down for just a second. You've gotten a lot better since the last time we played. Izuku admitted. Indeed. I have been training with Amai for quite some time. Through countless losses, I have become far better than I was before. Kiba cackled. Fear my might, caretaker. Fear it. I'm shaken. Izuku laughed, looking at her with a look of amusement and affection. Well, I guess I should give you a reward then.
Huh?
Kiba was turned around to ask him what he meant by that. She was suddenly enveloped by Izuku's arms and lifted up.
See, caretaker?
You are amazing, Izuku told her as he held her close to his chest. And you don't have to impress anyone. Kiba was just overwhelmed with warm, happy feelings. Right now Izuku was giving her everything she needed. Affection, validation, praise. It felt so indescribably good. Caretaker, this is an embarrassing position. Despite herself, Kiba lightly clung to Izuku, being careful not to crush him or anything. Kiba, I told you that you don't need to impress anyone. Izuku reminded her gently. You can keep the act up if you want, but sometimes I think it's okay to take off the filter and just do what you really want to do. Just for a little while. Kiba paused. Do what you wanted to do. Without the filter. Could she do that? The last time she did that, she tried to leave behind her persona entirely. And it was miserable. The Queen of Darkness persona was something that brought her great joy and comfort, but sometimes it could be a bit cumbersome when she wanted to express herself. So perhaps, just for tonight, she'd take off the mask and see what happens. I love you, Daddy, Akiba said as she hugged him a bit tighter. Feeling a sense of embarrassment but also relief at finally being able to say that. Izuku's face also went a bit red, both surprised that was the first thing that she said and over the moon that she said it. I love you too, Kiba. Daddy, is there a way I can get stronger? Like a lot stronger? Kiba asked, sounding slightly distraught. Well, you're already learning martial arts and you're regularly practicing with your quirk. Izuku moved to the bed and sat down, gently rocking Kiba in his arms like a baby, in a way that made Kiba feel very happy and extremely embarrassed. Why? Is something wrong? Eri gave me a cup of her blood because she was concerned about me, Akiba admitted, letting out a sigh filled with worry and frustration. And it was because I lost a fight. And not just lost, I was beaten like a rag doll. You lost to Sori, who is a well-trained bodyguard who was bred to be the strongest feline quirk-bearer. Izuku told her, trying to show her that it wasn't that bad. She has a lot more experience and skills than you. So I beat all of 1A without getting hit either. Yeah, but none of them have to drink blood to get their power. Kiba yelled out in exasperation, before looking down at herself in dismay. What's the point of hurting people for power if I can't even use that power to protect them? First off, you're not hurting people, Izuku told her firmly. Yes, you're taking blood, but people give that away all the time. Sometimes they give it away for free. It's a minor inconvenience. Second, most of the time, skill and experience trumps power. Not all the time, but most of the time. I heard from Sori that even though she trained for years, exercising and eating in ways to maximize her growth, you still were just as fast as her and decently stronger than her. But her training and experience let her get through the battle, and the only reason she didn't get hit was because she specifically focused on not getting hit because she knew a single hit from you could shift the tide of the battle. You are strong. But everyone needs time to gain skills and experience before they can take on people like Sori.
Even All Might?
Kiba asked. Izuku shrugged. Well, a rookie All Might could definitely beat Sori through pure power, but he better hope he's not fighting her in the city, because otherwise, he'd likely destroy everything around him. So yeah, I would say even he needed to gather skill and experience. Look at MT Lady. She's new, so she lacks a lot of experience when dealing with villains. Which is why she keeps causing so much property damage. Which is why, despite being powerful, she keeps losing popularity contests to Washington. Kiba snickered.
Vishish funny.
The fact that one of our top heroes is a washing machine with googly eyes never fails to make me laugh. That's another reason Wash keeps getting so high up in those rankings, Izuku said before his expression turned serious. Now, I want you to tell me more about Eri giving you her blood. Eri was just laying down in her bed, unable to fall asleep. Was it because of the phantom pain coming from her left arm after she carved it open with a knife earlier? No, she'd long since gotten used to phantom pains. Eri could sleep through those no problem. Especially this. This was nothing compared to what she felt while under overhaul. The real reason Eri couldn't sleep is because of a inner conflict. Knock. Knock. Knock.
Eri, are you awake in there?
Izuku asked, although he didn't sound as gentle as normal and his tone carried a sense of urgency.
Yes.
Eri responded as soon as she could.
Chikomein.
Izuku opened the door and entered the room. And he did not look happy. Eri, I heard that you gave Kiba some of your blood, Izuku said, but Eri could tell something was wrong. His tone was ice cold, something that was kind of freaking Eri out a little bit.
I'd like to know how you got it out of you?
Eri started sweating, looking away from Izuku as feelings of fear, dread, and guilt rose up inside her.
Izuku
looked over her sternly. Eri, did you cut yourself on purpose to draw blood to give to Kiba?
I just wanted to help.
Eri defended herself, pretty much admitting to what Izuku accused her of. You said if Kiba keeps getting hurt she might get a permanent injury.
And you said my blood can help with that. That doesn't mean you can cut yourself open.
Izuku almost shouted at her, his voice full of anger and concern. Just because you can heal yourself doesn't mean you should be hurting yourself.
But my blood can help.
Eri argued. You said my blood can help people, so why don't we use it more? We're already using it to help people, Eri, Izuku argued back, crossing his arms and giving her a stern look. That's why we're taking some every month.
But why don't we use it here?
Eri asked, looking like she was on the verge of tears. WWE could use it to make sure they don't get sick or stop permanent injuries or dash.
Eri.
Izuku cut her off, taking the edge out of his tone and once again speaking gently.
What's this about?
I'm not as useful as my blood. Eri said, looking down with shame. I still can't control my quirk. So I still can't help anyone with it. But my blood can. So, even if it hurts a bit? Izuku sighed.
Eri.
You and Kiba are more alike than you might think. You both lack patience for one. And you both don't value yourselves enough. It takes time to master a quirk, and you're already so much closer to controlling it than you were before. Eri still looked unsure. Also, remember, your quirk runs on a limited amount of energy. If you keep using your quirk to heal yourself, you might run out of energy and not be able to use your quirk when you really need it. Izuku explained, seeing Eri's eyes widen. It'll also leave you with less energy to use for practice, meaning it'll take you even longer to learn how to use your quirk. Eri stayed silent, although she did look considerably more regretful. Izuku patted her on the head. I understand not feeling like you're useful, but you're just a child. None of the adults are expecting you to be as capable as them, no matter what your quirk is. What you're doing with your quirk training and your helping out in the medbay is more than enough. And if something happens where your blood is absolutely necessary to fix an issue, I will talk to you about it and we can extract it in safer, less painful ways.
Understood?
Eri nodded somberly. Good. Now, you're grounded for tomorrow. After 1A leaves, I want you to stay in your room. And stay there until dinner.
Understood?
Izuku told her. Once again Eri nodded somberly. All right. Well, then I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku said before letting out a sigh. I'm not angry with you, Eri, I'm just concerned. You know I hate it when you kids hurt yourself. I'm sorry, Eri said quietly, looking down rather than at Izuku. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself. You're the one you disrespect. You're the one that you hurt. And remember, when you're hurt, it hurts your family too. Izuku told her, causing Eri to wince in shame. Just remember that whenever you feel like hurting yourself. Good night. And with that Izuku left, letting Eri reflect on her actions. It was the next day, and all of 1A was outside, with the kids right behind them, with Sori and Sai standing in front of them. The time had come for 1A to leave, and by now everyone had said their goodbyes and were just waiting for the school to them up. I am here. To pick you up. All Might shouted from inside a school bus that was driven by Aizawa. All Might, Sai muttered, her eyes fixed on the number 1 hero. You've met? Sori asked her curiously. Sai shook her head. No, but I did always want to work together with him. I wanted to witness that overwhelming power in person. Yeah, I get that. I always wanted to fight him. Sori smirked, cracking her knuckles. You'd lose. Immediately. Sai said, giving her a deadpan stare. Maybe. Still want to give it a shot though. Sori shrugged. Izuku opened up the gate and the bus came inside. Aizawa drove up to the house, parking just in front of the grim tree before parking. Ahaha. Good to see you, young Midoriya. I'm glad to see you've hired some help. All Might said, stepping out of the bus and looking over at Sai and Sori before leaning down and whispering. And by the way, how's the situation without American friends? Everything going well for now? I'll tell you if anything goes wrong. Izuku whispered back. All Might nodded before turning his attention to 1A. It's good to see you all again, students. You all look a bit stronger than when you first got here. I'm just glad none of you have been skipping out on your training, Aizawa said, also getting out of the bus, looking just as tired as usual. As if. I train every day to be the manliest man I can be. Kirishima said, flexing his muscles. We'd never slack off on our training, sir. Ida said, chopping the air like he normally does. Yeah, we've been working hard over here, sir. It was wild. Mina shouted. I'm glad to hear it. All Might said. Now let's dash. Bjarrrrrrrrr. Bjarrrrrrrrr. Suddenly, Izuku's phone came to life and blared out a loud alarm noise. Huh? Izuku quickly took out his phone and saw a big red notification on it that it said, Intruder Alert. What? Izuku shouted out in shock. But before he could press on the notification, a swirling vortex of black mist appeared in front of the bus, behind Aizawa. Aizawa's eyes widened and he immediately jumped back. Sai and Sori ran in front of Izuku, pulling him behind them as the vortex got bigger and bigger. Sensei, what's going on? Momo asked, confused and a little scared. I don't know, but stay behind us. All Might said, standing in front of the class. By now the vortex had gotten big enough to eclipse the bus completely. And out of the smoke came an army of people of all different shapes and sizes, but what they all had in common was that all of them looked incredibly vicious. Soon a small army had come through the portal and in front of them was a man with light blue hair who was covered in hands. All Might. Tamura Shigaraki said as he laid eyes on the number 1 hero, peering at him with a sadistic glee that promised terrible, terrible things. It's finally time for the symbol of peace to crumble. With the proclamation of All Might's imminent death, it was now completely safe to assume that these people were villains. Damn it! They have a warping quirk, there's no way my security could have stopped that. Izuku though, as he took a good look at the villains. The vast majority of them just seemed like basic thugs, although many of them seemed to have mutation quirks. Their leader stood in front of all of them, and to his sides were some rather off-putting people, mainly because they all had their brains exposed in some way. The biggest one was a giant about the size of All Might and even more muscly. It had pitch-black skin and a beak-like face, its brain completely exposed, and it wore a pair of beige shorts with skulls on its kneecaps. Next to it was a similar-looking creature, with black skin, however, its face was mostly hidden by skin that went over its head like a hood, but Izuku could just barely see its brain peeking out. It had a very bad hunch, making it almost seem like a quadruped, and its neck was far longer than normal. On the other side of Shigaraki was another hulking figure, although this one was more tall than muscular, being 2 heads taller than All Might. Its body was mostly covered in what looked like a tight leather trench coat, with the only part of its body that was visible being its head, which much like the other two, had its brain exposed, and under it were dirty piano key-like teeth, with skin stretched out around it. The last one was rather different from the other three. Its body had a shape that was almost exactly like a normal human, although it possessed a red long tail that went from its waist to the floor, and two long purple horns coming out of the side of its head and curving behind it, with its brain between them. Its body was mostly covered in purple armor, although the armor appeared to be part of its body, with some exposed red areas on its stomach, arms, and face. Lastly, it also had some bits of white armor over its forearms and legs. Although, unlike the others, this one looked more alive and had a look of malicious glee in its yellow eyes. Just as all the villains finished stepping out of the portals, the Grimm came in. Various Grimm came from out of the forest, surrounding, coming in through the gates to get closer to the villains. Rah! The Nuklavi came running out of the forest. Meanwhile, a hound jumped off the roof and a wyvern soared into view. "I don't know who you are, but I'd suggest surrendering now," All Might told Shigaraki, flashing him his signature grin. "Because I am here. Also, you are surrounded by an army of nightmare beasts," Aizawa pointed out as the Grimm completely surrounded the villains, growing menacingly, waiting for them to make a move. "Oh, we are aware of what we're up against, which is why we've come prepared," Shigaraki said confidently. "Ruin, why don't you show him what the anti-symbol of peace can do?" "Kill him!" Suddenly, the giant creature with its brain exposed, apparently called Ruin, rushed forward at a speed that most of the people there couldn't even see. But All Might could, and he moved just as fast towards the beast. Both of them cocked their arms back and got ready to throw a punch. Shroom! Their fists connected, creating a shockwave so powerful it kicked up storm-like winds, forcing everyone to guard their faces and look away. When they looked back, they saw the two fights, their fists still touching. And the Nomos seemed completely unaffected. "Oh shit." Kaminari summed up everyone's feelings at that time, as everyone on the hero's side looked at the scene in absolute shock, All Might included. This was the first sign that this was not going to be an easy battle. But with the first attack thrown, the Grimm descended onto the villains. Immediately, the villains started fighting back, some of them winning, some not so much. Meanwhile, the more powerful Grimm also started rushing in as well. The Nuklavi running in from behind, the hound from the front, and the wyvern dived at them from the sky. Nemesis, kill the horse. Janemba, kill the dog. Hood, take the dragon. Shigaraki ordered. Immediately, the purple and red Nomu, Janemba, turned towards the hound and shot out its arm, which stretched and extended out like Play-Doh, grabbing the hound by the throat and throwing it to the side. The hound rolled for a bit, before digging its claws into the ground and stopping itself. And while it was doing that, Janemba's body came apart, turning into tiny little blocks that flew behind the hound. Janemba reformed itself behind the hound and tried to stomp on it, but the hound jumped back, dodging the attack as Janemba's foot smashed into the ground. The hound lunged at Janemba, however, the foot that Janemba smashed into the ground extended through the ground and popped out, kicking the hound in the jaw and sending it flying back, landing on its spine. "Ahahaha!" Janemba let out a high-pitched evil laugh, seemingly enjoying this. Meanwhile, the tall trenchcoat one, Nemesis, turned towards the Nuklavi and raised its arm up at it as it charged towards it. Then, its arm began to morph and change shape, turning into huge cannon. Kaboom! Nemesis shoots out a huge blast from its arm cannon, impacting the Nuklavi's human torso. Rah! The Nuklv stopped its charge, roared in pain. The shot had destroyed most of its rib bones, and destroyed most of its right arm. Then Nemesis raised its other arm and shot a tentacle out of a hole on its wrist. The tentacle wrapped around the horse's head, and Nemesis jerked his arm to the side, dragging the Nuklavi to the side and causing it to fall on its side. Lastly, the hooded one, Hood, cocked back its arm and then shot it out at the wyvern, its long arm extending at rapid speed and smashing the wyvern in the face. Rah! The wyvern cried out as the blow hit it so hard that it broke off part of its mask. It threw its head back and panicky flapped its wings, trying to get away from Hood for the moment. But Hood was having none of that. Its shoots morphed, transforming into jets, and Hood took to the sky after the wyvern. All the while, All Might and Ruin had gotten into a punching match, the two throwing at rapid-fire punches, so fast and powerful that it created a whirlwind that kept anyone else from getting close.
"What the hell? What are these guys?"
Mineta shouted, shaking in fear at the powerful foes battling it out in front of him. "It's like they have multiple quirks." Izuku noticed, looking at the enemy with fear in his eyes. "Multiple quirks? Could they be working for All for One? Everyone, get inside, Aizawa said, getting ready to jump into the fray. We will take care of this, Sai said as she, Aizawa, and Sai got ready to fight. You want us to just leave? Kirishima asked in shock and outrage. But we can help. Achiko objected. You can and you will. Be guarding Midoriya and the kids. Aizawa said sternly. Yeah, if you guys watch over them, that means we can focus on taking down these bastards. Sori said, cracking her neck. Very well. Everyone get inside. Ida said, turning to the children. All of you as well. But we can help too. Netsu argued, his flames spiking in power as he got fired up. Yeah, let us kick these guys' butts. Ken said, holding up his Omnitrix. These villains will suffer for daring to invade my home. AKA shouted in rage. We can at least take the weaker ones, Nara added, trying to sound somewhat reasonable. Absolutely not. Izuku stepped in and looked at the children with a stern glare. All of you may be powerful, but you are also children. This is an army of real, actual killers, some of which look to be incredibly strong. We are going to the training room and locking ourselves inside. None of you are fighting unless you absolutely have to. Now let's go. Now. Fu sent out a few of Kyosei's tendrils out and wrapped them around Ken, Kiba, and AKA before starting to run towards the house. Hey! Let us go or I swear you'll regret it. AKA cursed as she struggled against Kyosei's reach. Not letting any of you do anything rash, Fu explained, before looking back at everyone else. Come on guys. Let's go. Izuku, 1A, and the kids all started to run away from the battle, some more reluctantly than others, with some also looking back at the adults who would soon be entering the battles. However, the last one to enter was Kei, who suddenly stopped, her eyes widening as she remembered something. Wait. What about Kai? I already texted him about the situation. The information should have gone straight to the screen in his room. Izuku told her as he picked her up. I told him to stay in his room and hide until the situation is over. There's nothing else we can do. Let's go. Izuku carried her inside, and with that, all of them had made it into the house. All right, now that they're gone, Sori smirked as she set her sights on Shigaraki, who was standing in the middle of the grim-slash-villain war that was happening, watching All Might battle ruin. I'ma take out the leader. Wait, Sori be dashed. Before Sai could finish, Sori lunged at Shigaraki at lightning-quick speeds, cutting through the air like a knife. Sori's smirk grew as she was only a few feet away from Shigaraku, and she got ready to punch him. Eat shit, asshole. However, once she was close, suddenly, a figure appeared next to her out of nowhere and punched her in her side, sending her rolling across the ground. Eck! Sori hissed as she rolled to her feet, quickly getting to her knee and holding her right side. Fuck, that stung. Sori looked up at the person who'd hit her, glaring at him intensely. The person was a man wearing a long black coat and big black boots. His skin was dark purple and he was also completely bald. He looked back at her coldly, standing with his hands in his pockets. Glad you're earning your pay, Hit, Shigaraki said, name-dropping the assailant. Hit didn't respond, not taking his eyes off Sori. Alright, you wanna play? Sori got up and extended her claws. Let's play. Sori dashed forward, moving faster than most people could react and reaching Hit in no time at all. She launched her arm forward to scratch his chest. But he suddenly vanished and her claws hit nothing. Sori didn't even have time to process that, as at the same time, Hit appeared beside her and punched her in the side again. Edge! She stumbled back holding her side yet again as she processed what just happened. Fast, but not fast enough. Hit replied, his voice cool and calm. It'd be rather soothing if you weren't trying to kill her. Hisses. Sori glared at Hit, but before she could attack, suddenly all she saw was purple. Smash! 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 Egg! Sori cried out in pain as she was suddenly struck from multiple places in stupidly quick succession. Sori fell to one knee, her body aching with pain from all the hits she had just taken. Damn it, this guy's no joke. I need to figure out how his quirk works. Looks like teleportation or something, but it's too damn fast and there's no glow or effect or anything. He just disappears and reappears somewhere else. Need to rely on my senses. She heard something behind her, and she quickly spun around and tried to kick him, only for the presence to vanish and reappear behind her, before punching her in the spine. Fuck! Sori cursed, turning around to try and grab Hit, only for Hit to vanish, now being a few yards away. Sori took some time to breathe and think. It's not teleportation. When he vanished, he reappeared in a completely different pose. Then how the hell is he doing this? Some kind of time manipulation. Shit, I need to focus. Seeing that Sori was in trouble, Aizawa and Sai were about to step in. However, suddenly, some strings wrapped around Aizawa and threw him into the air. Eraserhead. Sai was about to open a portal to cut the strings on Aizawa while he was flying away, but her attention was suddenly shifted to something more imminent. She shot out a wall of swords out next to her as a red bolt of lightning-like energy smashed into it. Shum! The energy exploded, destroying the swords and forcing Sai to look away as the force from the explosion almost swept her away. When she looked back, she saw her swords were destroyed, and standing on the other side of the destroyed sword wall was a figure shrouding in smoke from the explosion. Finally! After all this time I finally found you, said the figure in a tough-sounding female voice. The figure stepped out of the smoke and was revealed to look exactly like a teenage version of Sai. She wore a red tube top and a pair of very short shorts as well as a red leather jacket and red shoes. In her hand a gray sword, with a red handle and a bit of red going down the base of the sword. Surprised to see me, father? The girl shouted, glaring intensely at Sai. What? Sai responded, giving her the most confused look she'd ever given in her life. Don't play innocent. Now you'll finally pay for abandoning me and mom, you freaking deadbeat. The enraged girl shouted as she held her sword up. Suddenly, that red electricity emanated from her body, frying the ground around her. The energy poured into her sword, surrounding it with that red energy. She then swung his sword at Sai, unleashing a slash of red lightning-like energy at Sai. In response, Sai opened a portal in front of her and shot out an explosive sword at the slash. Boom! The sword hit the energy and exploded, but the energy just kept coming. Sai's eyes widened, and she barely managed to jump to the side in time, her arm getting grazed by the energy as she dodged. Ack! Sai held her arm burning with pain, and she could see the wound through her torn sleeve. Shit! Sai looked back at her young doppelganger and saw her unleashing a few more energy slashes at her. Not having much time to dodge, Sai made another wall of swords in front of her. This time it was a two-layer wall rather than a signal layer one. The energy slashes crashed into the wall, exploding against it and breaking quite a few swords, but not fully destroying the wall. Sai looked at her doppelganger through the broken parts of the wall and opened a bunch of portals around her, with sword tips peeking out, ready to be fired. The doppelganger raised her sword, and the red lighting exploded off of it, shooting bolts all over the place, destroying all the swords that were about to be launched at her. She then ran out, leaping between the portals and running at Sai, unleashing an even more powerful energy slash at Sai's sword wall. Boom! Eck! The slash hit, exploding and tearing the wall apart, causing Sai to go flying and land on her back. She groaned in pain for a moment before forcing herself to sit up. Oh! She's strong. Fathair. Sai looked up and saw the girl had jumped into the air and was now descending down on her, with her sword covered in red lightning and pointed down at her. Sai quickly opened a portal next to her and grabbed onto the hilt of a rocket sword that dragged her away from her current position as her doppelganger slammed into the ground, her sword stabbing into the ground, discharging red energy into the ground, causing it to explode. Fortunately, Sai was out of the blast radius, her rocket sword carrying her a few yards away before it ran out of fuel and the sword's hilt stopped spewing fire. Sai was dragged a couple more feet before coming to a halt. Both Sai and her younger doppelganger brought themselves to their feet and glared at each other. Heh! Suddenly her doppelganger smirked. You're just as strong as I thought you'd be. Glad you're not leaving me disappointed for once. Okay, look. I do not have time for whatever this is, Sai said firmly. I have no idea who you are, but I can assure you, I am not your father. As you can see, I am a woman. You're probably confusing me for my brother, or perhaps one of my many sisters, although I'm fairly certain none of them possessed male genitalia the last time I saw them. You're the former hero Saber, right? The lookalike asked. Sai nodded her head in response. Then I'm not mistaken. You're my bastard father who ran out on mom the moment you found out she was pregnant. Sai rubbed her temple in frustration. Firstly, that's impossible because I've never had a lover and I am a woman. Secondly, I would never ever do such a thing. And third, even if I did do something deplorable, that doesn't justify murder. Like I care about justifying shit.
You made my life hell, I'm gonna kill you.
The girl said, angrily raising her sword. And since you probably ran away before I got named, I'll tell you who's about to send you straight to hell. My name is Konoshir.
No die, you freaking deadbeat.
Meanwhile, Aizawa had been dragged away to the outskirts of the fighting area and was dragged along the ground by the strings. Aizawa reached for his short blade and cut the strings around his waist. Although they were very tough, had his blade not been top of the line, he wouldn't have been able to cut them. Once Aizawa came to halt and picked himself up, he heard a voice speak to him.
Oh my.
You cut through my threads, that must be a pretty nice knife you got there.
Said an annoyingly cutesy voice.
Aizawa looked up and saw a young woman standing in front of him. She was about average height, although her blonde hair was about as big as her, styled into two massive drills, with some smaller locks framing her face and a massive pink bow. She wore a pink Lolita-style dress, with matching boots and fingerless gloves, and a pink heart choker. She looked at him with a cute smile, but Aizawa could see her sinister intention in her eyes.
Looking at him like he was her new toy.
One that she looked forward to breaking. Immediately, Aizawa activated his quirk, hoping whoever this was didn't know who he was and underestimated him. The girl pouted.
Hey, what did you just do?
My quirk isn't working right all of a sudden.
Good.
She doesn't know who I am. Hopefully, I can end this quickly. Aizawa thought to himself as he rushed forward at the girl and punched her in the face. And the moment Aizawa's fist connected with her face, he realized something was wrong. It didn't feel like he was punching flesh, it felt like he was punching steel strings. And all punching her seemed to do was tilt her head a bit and hurt his own hand. Realizing his mistake, Aizawa jumped back and the girl pouted at him. You heroes really don't know how to treat a lady. The girl flashed him a menacing smile. Guess I better teach you a lesson. I can't use my quirk like I'm used to, so I'm gonna have to improvise. I've never beat a man to death before, but Mama always said to try new things. Aizawa grit his teeth and pulled out his blade. I hope the kids have at least made it to the safety. Izuku, 1A, and the kids were currently in the entry hall, looking on at what was in front of them in fear and anger. Eri in particular was frozen stiff with fear, her body trembling.
And no.
Blocking their path were former Yakuza members, Rappa, Didoro Sakai, Sora Mitsutabe, Yuhojo, Toya Setsuno, Rikiya Katsukame, and Chronostasis. Hello Eri, Chronostasis said, his carrying a clam fury that reminded Eri far too much of Overhaul.
It's been a while. Stay away from her.
Kiba instantly got in front of Eri, taking a defensive stance in front of the girl. Ken, Nara, Netsu, Fu, Sanson, and Yami quickly doing the same.
So you must be the creeps that tortured Eri.
Mina said, glaring at them. I've been wanting to kick your asses for a while.
Yeah.
Time to pay for what you did to Eri scumbags. Kirishima said, hardening himself and getting ready for battle. Achiko activated One for All at 15% and turned to Izuku and the kids. Izuku, take the kids and get to the safe room. Alright, but we need to get these guys off the stairway first, Izuku said, looking at all the villains lined up on the stairs, blocking their way. No problem, Todoroki said, going out in front and shooting out a massive blast of fire, aiming just above the staircase, so as not to set it on fire too. All the villains jumped off the staircase, dodging the fire, which hit the back of the wall, setting it on fire as well. I knew getting him to use his fire was a good idea. Yonda thought to herself, smirking proudly.
Kill them.
Chrono ordered.
Aye? This is gonna be fun.
Rappa smiled as he and the others ran at 1A, who went to fight them off. Izuku and all the children ran up the stairs, many of the children looking down at the fights around them, wishing they could help. Damn it! I feel so useless. Kiba grit her teeth so hard it hurt, feelings of anger, fear, and self-loathing flooding her body. One day I'll fight too. As Izuku and the kids reached the third floor, they quickly ran into the hallway heading towards the training room. They're going to be okay, right? Kei asked, looking very worried, many of the children sharing a similar expression. They will be. Itsukulit. In truth, he had no idea if everyone was going to be okay. But he couldn't tell the kids that, otherwise they'd insist on joining the fight. All they have to do is hold off the villains until reinforcements come. I've already sent a message to the police, they're sending heroes here to help with the situation. We just need to keep you all safe until they get here. All the children looked at each other worriedly, each having different thoughts on the matter. Damn it, I should have stayed back and fought them off. Ken hated the idea of running away. The only reason he followed Izuku's orders and did so was because the Nomu outside had freaked him out a bit with their overwhelming abilities.
Man, this sucks.
I really wanted to kick those Yakuza guys' butts.
Netsa thought. Please be okay. Please be okay. Please be okay.
Eri was still shaking, desperately hoping that this whole thing was another nightmare and that she'd wake up any moment. I hope 1A makes them suffer for hurting Eri. Kyoko thought, absolutely furious to see the former Yakuza out of prison. Oh, father, I hope you're right about this, father. Yonda thought to herself before she noticed something. Wait, those voices, I don't recognize these thoughts. All right, the training room is right around this corner. Izuku said to the children as they approached a turning point in the hallway.
Wait.
Father, stop. Yonda stopped running along with everyone as she tried to warn them all. But it was too late. Izuku and all the kids turned the corner and stopped when they saw what was in front of them. For more villains. Standing right in front of the training room, which was locked tight. Two of them were more of the same brain-exposed things that were outside, both of them were massive hulking figures. One had gray skin and rhino-like feet as well as a rhino-like horn coming out of its forehead. The other had a dark green body with bumpy reptile-like skin and dragon-like claws, its ears were pointy like a goblin's and a face like that of a goblin as well. There also was a young boy present, around the same age as the other children. He wore a black cloak and an all-black outfit that complemented his pale skin. What's more, he was completely bald and had a rather bony face, almost a skeleton with skin. He looked at them with a cold, neutral expression. Lastly, there was a 9-foot-tall very pale woman, looking down on them, wearing an expensive-looking white dress, a pair of black heels, and a white sun hat. Her black hair was styled in a bun and her eyes were the most piercing blue Izuku had ever seen. Finally. Hello, children. The woman said kindly to the children, smiling at them, before turning to Izuku, her expression instantly morphing into that of disgust and fury. Quirkless scum. I am Lady Kikutsuki. And I am here to set things right and save these children. Somehow, I doubt that, Fu said, standing in front of Izuku, with quite a few of the other children doing the same. Oh, but it's true. I'm here to save you all from this quirkless piece of trash and his brainwashing. Lady Q spat, glaring at Izuku with eyes full of hate and anger. You children all have wondrous power, but those ignorant curs in the government decided to push you away to the edge of the city. Treating you like outsiders rather than like the superior beings you are. And what's worse, they put you under the care of someone who doesn't even have the right to exist. Unforgivable. I'm here to correct this mistake by killing this quirkless whelp and taking you with me to be given to more suitable parents. Except you. She pointed to Kiba, giving her a look that made Kiba's blood boil. It was an affectionate look. One that would normally make her feel good if it wasn't being given to her by someone she now utterly despised. You, I will take as my own daughter. Lady Q explained, smiling fondly. Kiba looked down, her face covered in shadow. I am going to beat you into a coma. And before anyone could stop her, Kiba rushed at Lady Q, kicking her in the abdomen so hard that it sent her flying across the hallway and through the opposite wall.
Kiba!
Izuku called after her, but it was too late as Kiba rushed after Lady Q, intent on fulfilling her promise. Seeing as the first punch was already thrown, the fight began. Ken and Nara activated their Omnitrixis. Ken transforms into 4 arms and Nara turning into Diamond Head. At the same time, the Goblin Nomu, or just Goblin for short, shot a fireball out of its mouth, aimed right at the children. Nara ran in front, and slammed her hand into the ground, making diamonds rise up, forming a barrier. The fireball exploded against the crystal shield, cracking it, but not breaking it. We can stand fire. Get that thing away from us. Fu ordered.
Go it.
Ken and Shiruka ran past the crystal, ducking to dodge another fireball, before tackling the goblin, dragging him through the hallway, and sending him through the same wall Kiba had gone through. It was after this that the Rhino Nomu, or just Rhino for short, rushed at them. Fu and Sanson both rushed into action, grabbing him with their tendrils and trying to steer him to the left. It was difficult because of its immense power and weight, but they managed to turn it slightly towards the left, causing it to crash through a wall, taking Sanson and Fu with it. I'm gonna help Ken and Shiruku. You guys protect Izuku. Nara said as she ran past the cloaked boy to help her brother. With all the other enemies gone, it was just the small boy in the cloak left. Listen, I don't know who you are, but you don't need to do this. Izuku tried to reason with the child, desperately not wanting his children to have to hurt another child. Unfortunately, it seems his pleas fell on deaf ears, as the child just stared at them before transforming their right arm into a scythe. Yami and Netsu went to the front, preparing to fight, but to their surprise, Kei pushed past them.
"Sorry, but I won't let you hurt my family," Kei said as she got ready to lift up her visor. However, she never got the chance.
Suddenly the boy rushed forward, moving at superhuman speeds, and cuts Kei's arm.
"Kei!"
Everyone shouted in concern.
"Egg!"
Kei groaned in pain as suddenly her body started to feel strange.
"What's happening?"
And then her body began to change rapidly. Her snakes just vanished off her head, her skin turned a pale white as her body began to shift and change, her clothes doing the same, her usual white dress shifting color and becoming black and changing shape. In just a few seconds, Kei had turned into an exact copy of the boy that had attacked her.
"KK?"
Eri whispered, staring at the copy in fear and disbelief. "Sorry, Kei isn't here at the moment." The copy that was once Kei said in a cold, emotionless voice, turning to face the group. "Right now, you can call us Gami."
What did you do to Kei?"
Fuku asked, tears spilling out of her eyes as she did everything that she could to avoid spilling out her gas. "My quirk, it's called Death's Hand." The original Gami explained, raising up his scythe hand. "It allows me to transform my hands into scythes, and if anything gets cut with my scythe, I can kill any part of them. Whether that be something physical or not. In this case, I killed that girl's individuality, causing her to become an exact copy of whatever person she just touched, which was me. Hence the transformation," said the copy Gami. "But don't worry too much. My quirk only lasts for 9 minutes. Gami told them before pointing his scythe at them. "Can you last that long? I wonder. Damn it. I have to get the kids to safety. Otherwise, they'll all just be turned into copies of that boy and be used to fight against Okako and the others." Izuku thought, looking towards the locked training room door. But the doors are locked and Gami is standing right in front of them.
"How do?"
And then their saving grace appeared. Mu popped his head out of the side of the wall.
"Everyone, come in here. I can get you into the room."
"Mu!" Fuku called out, happy to see her friend come to their rescue. "Not gonna happen," Gami said, rushing forward to cut Mu, only to be hit by a fireball. Gami flew back but didn't look to be in any pain, and the copy Gami had to dodge another fireball that Netsu threw at them. "Not on my watch. Your speed won't take me by surprise again," Netsu said, running in front of Mu to protect him. Yami also ran forward, having created 2 liquors on his arms to use as weapons.
"Everyone go. Me and Yami will take these too,"
Netsu ordered. Izuku clenched his teeth. He really didn't want to leave these kids to fight on their own, but at this point he had no choice. "Alright, be careful you two." Then, Izuku quickly helped all the other kids into Mu's portal, which took them through the wall and out of another portal, which took them out of Mu's dimension before they started to decay. Eventually, it was only Izuku and AKA left. "Come on AKA, we need to go," Izuku said, about to grab AKA and take her with him through the portal, but she stepped back. "I'm afraid not. I need to help make these villains pay. I'm going to help Fu and Sanson destroy that rhino thing and take over its body," AKA told him before running through the hole Rhino made. Izuku looked at AKA as she ran with a remorseful look. It shouldn't have come to this. He then turned to Yami and Netsu. "You two. I believe in both of you. Make me proud." Yami nodded.
"Will do, Dad,"
Netsu said, giving him a heroic smile. Izuku smiled back before jumping through the portal, leaving them to fend for themselves. Netsu and Yami turned back to the 2 Gamis and saw one of them cutting their arm, but the cut also appeared in the other one's arm, despite him not actually cutting himself. It was also then they noticed there were a few other shallow cuts on their arm. Then, they both rushed at Netsu.
"Oh no, you don't."
Netsu unleashed a flamethrower attack on the 2 of them, completely engulfing them in fire. Only for them to jump out of the fire, right in front of him, with not a single burn on them. The only sign they'd been inside a fire at all was that all their clothes had been incinerated off of them, leaving them both nude. But the bigger issue was that they were both descending on him, size ready to cut into him. However, Yami jumped back and had the liquor shoot out its tongue, wrapping around Netsu and pulling him back just in time as the 2 boys' sides hit the floor instead.
"That was close, thanks for the save, bro."
Netsu thanked him as Yami had his liquor detach its now burned tongue so it could grow a new one. As the two gammies were pulling their scythes out of the floor, Yami opened his mouth and spat out a bunch of grim batter that turned into ravagers before it even hit the ground. Soon the entire hallway was completely filled with ravagers that attacked the two gammies, distracting them for a while and obscuring their vision. Meanwhile, Yami rushed Netsu to the side of the hallway. Must be killing weaknesses. Makes them stronger. Harder to fight. Killing weaknesses? Netsu thought about what Yami was saying for a moment. He thought back to how his fireball had damaged them at first, but after they cut themselves, it didn't. He also thought back to the other cuts he saw in their arm. Oh yeah, if they cut themselves and killed their weakness, I guess that would make them stronger. It explains why they're so darn fast. They must have just killed their flammability or something. Darn. Does that mean my quirk is useless now? Yami shook his head. All quirk have limit. All things burn if get too hot. Try making hotter flame. Netsu nodded. Alright, I'll try dash. And then suddenly, the floor started to creak and shake. Huh? Netsu looked down at the floor while Yami jumped backward, concerned that something might pop out and attack. Only for the floor to collapse, dropping them both down to the second floor. Meanwhile, Fu, Sanson, and Rhino had crashed through multiple walls and floors, ending up in the cafeteria. Rhino threw Fu off his leg, chucking him to the other side of the room, breaking a lot of his bones, which quickly started to heal. Sanson wrapped herself around Rhino's body, trying to restrain him, but to no avail. Rhino was simply too strong and started tearing pieces of her off him, eventually ripping her into so many different pieces that were now scattered all over the cafeteria, and shaking her off of him, before trying to stomp her to death, which of course didn't do much to her. While Rhino was attacking Sanson, Fu had finished regenerating and was wondering what to do. Looking at Rhino, and his exposed brain in particular. Its skin is so thick. I'm not sure I can even put a dent in him. Fu thought. Too bad Sanson's not in her acid form. The only way I can think to defeat it would be to attack its brain. Only problem is that would definitely kill it. It's not that Fu couldn't kill. He definitely could, and he probably wouldn't feel too bad about it, something he'd been horrified about the first time he thought about it. However, killing had consequences, and he's not sure how exactly those consequences would play out or how they'd affect Izuku. Plus he also didn't want to completely forsake his humanity, so he'd try a bit harder instead of immediately resorting to murder. And so instead, he charged at Rhino, jumping on his back while he was distracted and making a bunch of tendrils before shoving them in Rhino's mouth, hoping to suffocate the monster into unconsciousness. Rhino's counter to this was simply, he bit down, severing the tendrils before spitting out the remaining parts of Kyosei that were still in his mouth. It then started to flail around wildly, trying to shake Fu off him, destroying the floor and all the tables around him. He tried to reach up and grab Fu off his back, but Fu was stuck on part of his back that he couldn't reach. Fu then just tried stabbing him with sharpened tendrils, but to no effect. Fu couldn't scratch it. Well, that didn't work. Alright, murder it is. Fu's tendrils were now pointed at Rhino's brain, ready to pierce it and kill the monster. Finally! I found you at last! AKA suddenly ran into the cafeteria, ready to help. And immediately, she caught Rhino's attention, the beast of a man staring her down. Uh-oh, AKA said, realizing perhaps she shouldn't have announced her arrival. Rhino immediately started running towards her, but before he could get to her, Sanson slithered in front of him, letting him step on her, making him slip and fall on his face. Fu grabbed AKA with one of his tendrils and kept her next to him. All you need to do is make a cut, and I shall take control over this creature's simple mind. AKA told him. Yeah, I know, give me a second, Fu told her, going into deep thought as Rhino got off the ground. I can't kill it now. If AKA takes control of it, this thing could be a massive help. Fu thought. But how do I cut it? I can't break its skin, maybe its insides? But wouldn't that kill it? What can I cut that's squishy and won't kill it? Wait. That's right. Fu sent out another tendril into Rhino's mouth as he got to his feet and quickly made a cut in its tongue. I did it. Now give me a piece of you. Fu ordered. AKA quickly tore off a piece of herself and threw it at Fu, who caught it with one of Kyosei's tendrils. Kyosei then shoved the piece of AKA against Rhino's tongue. That piece then tunneled into Rhino's tongue, entering his body and starting the assimilation processes. Rah! Rhino groaned as he rampaged around a bit more, breaking things in the area until eventually, it fell to its knees and its eyes turned blue. Once it stopped moving, Fu looked back to AKA. Are you controlling it yet? AKA nodded, but she looked perplexed. This thing is not normal. Its body, its mind, its all, this creature is not human, at least not anymore. Fu was very tempted to ask what that meant, however, they had more pressing matters. We can worry about that later. For now let's go help Ken, Nara, and Shiruka with that goblin thing.
Slam.
Kiba crashed through the wall of one of the empty bedrooms and rolled across the ground until her back hit the opposite wall. Egg. Kiba groaned in pain as she rolled over onto her belly before pushing herself up. Her clothes were in tatters, covered in slashes, and soaked in blood from the various cuts and gashes in Kiba's body. As Kiba was pulling herself to her feet, Lady Q stepped into the room. Her dress was also very much destroyed, the bottom part of it just completely gone, exposing her long legs, and she had a couple of cuts and bruises on her as well. But most notable was that her fingernails had extended into long thin, needle-like claws that were covered in Kiba's blood. The blood was quickly sucked into the claws, and then, all of Lady Q's wounds started to heal until they vanished completely. Lady Kikutsuki. Quirk, vampiric power. She can extend her nails into long claws, which can absorb blood. Once she's absorbed blood, she can use it to enhance her body, as well as heal herself. So much power. You're even stronger than I am and you're just a child. The tall woman said, giving her a slightly disappointed look. But you don't know how to use it. That quirkless idiot can't show you how to use your power.
Don't call him that.
Kiba roared. At this point, she was so mad she could barely feel the pain as she forced herself to her legs. Oh please darling, can't you see, that thing has no right to exist. A weakling who hides behind children. Lady Q said, disgust and contempt dripping from her voice. I am far, far superior to him. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Kiba screamed, breathing heavily not because of her wounds, but because of the sheer rage coursing through her. Her body felt like it was on fire, and her mind was getting cloudier by the second. Her rage was so overwhelming that she clutched her now aching head. Eh. You know I'm right. She smiled confidently at Kiba. If you really wanted to defend him, you would have gone all out at the beginning of the battle and killed me. But you didn't. You know you want to be with me. Kill, Kiba grunted, that word sticking with her and embedding itself into her mind. That's right. We are the powerful. We take what we want and kill those weaklings who stand against us. Lady Q preached. Kill. 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 Kiba's repeated over and over again, as suddenly it was all she could focus on. And then her body started to change. Her hair began to turn red, starting from her roots, going all the way to her tips. The whites of her eyes and her fingernails joined in, turning crimson red, and her fingernails extended as well, becoming even more claw-like. Her veins popped out, almost glowing red, and her muscles seemed to increase in size slightly as her fangs extended. While this transformation was happening, Lady Q looked on in shock. What is this? Kill. 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 Kiba roared, her voice now carrying an animalistic rage, and just looking at her, Lady Q could see only a rage-filled demon. And then with strength, unlike anything Kiba had shown before, she lunged at the woman, intent on ending her life. Eck! Netsa hit the ground, landing in a classroom after the floor had collapsed. Oh. He pulled himself up and looked around. Yami? Where'd you go? Unfortunately, Yami had landed in a different room, meaning Netsa was on his own. But not for much longer, as soon, one of the Gammies ran into the room, having landed nearby. Immediately, Netsa reacted, doing what Yami had suggested, and increasing the power of his flames several-fold. Firewall! Netsa's body exploded with blue fire, the floor burned underneath him, the desks melted around him, and the chairs caught on fire just being near him. Gammy backed up a bit, not knowing if their quirk would protect them from the now much hotter flames. Looks like Yami was right. Just had to increase the temperature. Netsa smirked, now confident in his ability to fight against Gammy. He formed a fireball in his hand. So, ready to get scorched? I don't know, ready to kill your own sister? Gammy asked coldly. Netsa's eyes widened. What? Remember, one of us is just your sister. And right now, we both are exactly identical and we stay identical. Gammy explained. Meaning if one of us gets hurt, we both do. In other words, attack me and you'll be setting that K-girl on fire.
That you jerk?
Netza shouted at them in rage, his fire's ferocity increasing ever so slightly more. I can't attack you like this, and you can't attack me. Gammy surmised. However, my quirk's effects will wear off in a few minutes. But you can't keep this fire up forever, or else you won't be able to breathe. I wonder if you can last? Growling. Netza grit his teeth in anger and frustration, balling his fist up, trying to keep his cool and not literally explode. I have to keep this up. Just for a bit longer. Don't worry, Kay. I'll save you. Yami, meanwhile, had landed in the library, his cloak softening his fall as he landed on one of the tables, but first, smashing through it. Glad I always wear cloak. Yami thought as he picked himself off the ground and onto his feet. He looked around for Netsu but couldn't find him. His search was interrupted by the sound of footsteps running towards the library. By the time Yami turned his head towards the entrance, Gammy was already walking through the door. Yami reacted immediately, spitting out more grim batter that quickly turned into more ravagers. This again? Gammy asked as he tried jumping at Yami, trying to ignore the ravagers, but very quickly he was dragged down by the swarm of ravagers. Oh, I am so glad I can't annoyance right now. Yami kept vomiting up more ravagers, until the room was pretty much full of them, completely obscuring Gammy's vision. And Yami's. Normally Yami would have been able to see someone even with a massive swarm of ravagers blocking his view via tracking their emotions. However, Gammy had no emotions. None. Literally none. Not even the small amount Fu still had, Gammy felt absolutely nothing. He must have killed emotions. Yami speculated before shaking his head. Doesn't matter, just need wait. Gammy told them his quirk wore off in just a few minutes, now it was a matter of staying away from his scythe. Back outside, Tamura was watching his Nomu fight. Nemesis was currently dealing with the massive amount of Grim. Half of the fodder villains he'd brought along had already fallen to them, it was needed to fend off the seemingly never-ended Grim reinforcements. Hood on the other hand. Crash! The wyvern hit the ground, multiple pieces of its body were destroyed, and many of its bony parts were broken. As the wyvern started to fade away, Tamura smiled. Finally. Now I can have Hood help Ruin. Currently, Ruin and All Might were still going at it, although the fight was a bit farther away from everyone else. All Might still couldn't do much damage to Ruin, but Ruin wasn't doing much damage either, as All Might used his skills and experience to keep the mindless doll from landing any serious hits. Hood go kill Dash. Before Shigaraki could finish his order, the ground suddenly started to shake. It was then that Kai flew through the roof of his room and into the air, his massive figure nearly eclipsing the entire battleground. Who's hurting my family? Kai bellowed as loud as he could, nearly blowing out the ears of many of those fighting below. His three heads all showing different emotions. His left head was showing concern, looking around for Izuku and his siblings, and his middle head showed anger, glaring down at the villains. Lastly, his right head was crying. Shit, somehow I forgot about him, Shigaraki grunted in annoyance. Hood, subdue him. Or kill him if you need to. I don't really care. Hood, still in the sky, rocketed towards Kai at high speeds, and before Kai could even react, Hood did another extended arm punch, hitting his middle head on his forehead. Eh! The middle head roared, as he threw it back in pain, while he used his other head to try and bite Hood. This failed miserably as Hood easily dodged both heads, before smacking them both with its extended limbs. Eh! Kai roared in pain, his voice once again resonated throughout the battlefield. So annoying. Shigaraki sighed. Master, I have returned. Kurojiri appeared beside Shigaraki. I finished deploying the last of our forces throughout the forest. Part of their plan included leaving squads of villains throughout the forest to fight off the Grim. It would keep the Grim from swarming on them too much and keep Shigaraki from having to actually fight an army himself. Kaboom! Ga! Shigaraki and Kurojiri turned their attention to Sai and Kanashi's fight. Sai had managed to get some distance on Konosuke and was pounding the area around her with explosive swords. Jia! Konosuke shouted as she raised her sword, unleashing more bolts of red energy to destroy all the swords being shot at her, but this just caused them to explode, the explosion engulfing Konosuke within it. When the explosion died down and the dust cleared, Konosuke was on one knee looking very much worse for wear. She was covered in burns and soot, her skin was bruised and bloody, and she was breathing heavily. "Humph. This fight is over," Sai said, before opening a bunch of portals in front of her and chewing out blunt swords to smack her right in the face. Konosuke tried to get up, but her knees were too weak and she collapsed back onto one knee as the swords got closer and closer. And then, Kurogiri opened up a portal in front of her, snatching up the swords before spitting them out of a portal behind Sai. Sai created portals behind her and deflected those swords, and both she and Konosuke glared at Kurogiri. "Stay out of this!" Konosuke shouted at Kurogiri. "This is between me and my father." "The League of Villains does not care about your family situation," Kurogiri told her. "You are losing and that could affect the tide of battle. As such, I have stepped in to ensure our victory. If you do not wish for me to be involved, show me that my assistance is unnecessary." "TCH." Konosuke stood up. "Fine. Not like I have a choice." Sai looked at her two opponents, trying not to look as nervous as she felt. "Things aren't looking good. At this rate, I don't think our side can win this. I just have to hold out hope for reinforcements." Meanwhile, the goblin fight had been taken into the backyard after Ken and Shiruka managed to tackle him through the house. "Ra!" The goblin roared as Ken and Shiruka tackled it to the ground. "Keep it pinned!" Shiruka ordered as she jumped back, while Ken tried to keep the monster pinned, struggling to keep it down as the monster proved to be a bit stronger than him. Fortunately, he wouldn't have to do it for long as Shiruka proceeded to shoot out a bunch of webs at the beast, keeping it stuck to the ground with many coats of her webbing and making sure to web down its arms and legs. "Alright. Great job, Shiruka." Ken praised his teammate as he smirked and cracked his knuckles, getting ready to lay down a beating on the Nomo. Wham! 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 Ken proceeded to punch the Nomu with all four of his arms, letting loose a barrage of punches, unleashing over a dozen every few seconds. Shiruka joined in, leaping over to the opposite side and unleashing numerous blows to the monster's face, creating quite a few bruises. "Ra! Ra! Ra!" The goblin roared before suddenly its body exploded into flames. "Oh! Hot! Hot!" Ken shouted as he and Shiruka jumped away from the golbin, their hands now slightly burnt from the fire. "Oh no!" Shiruka stared at the flaming Nomu in horror and saw her webs starting to burn away. "Ra!" Soon the goblin broke out of the webs, its body still on fire. And if that wasn't bad enough, they also saw the bruises on its body quickly heal until goblin was good as new. Shiruka and Ken looked at the monster in fear, their eyes widened as both of them were now at a bit of a loss on how to fight this thing. While they were stunned, the goblin looked at them before spitting out a massive fireball headed straight towards them. Before it could hit them, however, a massive crystal wall popped out of the ground, shielding them from the fireball, which exploded against the crystal, cracking it slightly. "Finally caught up to you too." Ken and Shiruka looked behind them and saw Nara running up towards them. "Sis. For once I'm glad to see you," Ken said as the goblin continued to shoot fireballs at the shield. "Same." Nara nodded. "What's the situation? Do you know what this guy's quirk is?" "No, but from what we know, he's stronger than Ken, can set himself on fire, as well as shoot it, and he regenerates," Shiruka explained as quickly as she could. "Ara!" Suddenly the goblin jumped over the shield, leaping into the air intent on stomping down on them. Ken and Shiruka ran, with Nara walking backward slowly as she aimed her arm upwards, before shooting out a bunch of small sharp crystals. This did very little, most of the crystals just bounced off its skin, some of them made small cuts, but those almost immediately regenerated. Slam! The goblin crashed into the ground, causing it to shake and for Nara to lose her balance and fall on her back. "Ack!" Nara grunted, quickly trying to get up, but the goblin swiftly stamped its foot down on her chest, slamming her back down into the ground, creating a small crater. "Get off her!" Ken screamed as he rushed towards the goblin and tackled it off of his sister. "Edge!" Ken grits his teeth, the pain from grabbing the on-fire goblin hitting him each second, but he had to endure. As Ken pushed the goblin dug its feet into the ground, slowing Ken down before the goblin grabbed Ken's head, looked down at him, and unleashed a flamethrower attack right at his face. "Eh!" Ken screamed in pain, trying to move away from the goblin, but the goblin grabbed his arm, keeping him in place. Thwip! Shiruka shot another web at the goblin, this time at the back of his head. This got the goblin's attention and it stopped attacking Ken to turn its head to look at Shiruku.
Let him go, monster!
Shiruku shouted at the goblin, fear brimming in all 5 of her eyes, her 6 legs shaking. Rah! The goblin threw Ken to the ground and started running at Shiruku. Shiruku then turned the other way and ran. The goblin chased after her, the two running all the way over to the pool. Shiruku then leaped into the air, the goblin jumping after her. Then Shiruku shot out a web line at the goblin's chest, and before the fire could melt it off, she grabbed the web line and used it to slam the goblin into the pool.
Splash!
The goblin and Shiruku, as she was connected to him via the web line, were slammed into the bottom of the pool. Quickly, the goblin's flames went out, although the water around him did start to heat up quickly. Alright, now that the fire is out, I just need to. Shiruku's train of thought was cut off when she noticed the water around her getting very, very warm very quickly.
Shisasis!
Shiruku's eyes widened as the water around her started to boil and started getting uncomfortable to be in. She looked at Goblin, who while still not on fire, was now glowing, seemingly increasing the heat its quirk gave off, trying to light itself back on fire.
Oh.
Shiruku realized quickly that her plan was not going to work and decided to retreat immediately. She jumped out of the pool, which was now starting to bubble and emit steam.
What's going on?
Nara asked, her brother's arm slung around her hard diamond-like shoulder, as Ken was so weak she had to help him walk. It's boiling the pool, Shiruku answered simply, not taking her eyes off the pool. Soon the pool began to bubble and steam more and more, until soon all that became visible was steam. Shiruku, Ken, and Nara all stared at what was now a pit of steam. And when the steam started to part, they saw the goblin, on fire, standing in the now empty pool.
Shit!
Ken cursed weakly.
Crash!
The goblin leapt out of the pool, jumping over the 3 kids, before landing a few yards behind them. Rah! The goblin roared as it charged toward all 3 of them. Nara was ready to set up another diamond shield wall. When suddenly, the space in front of them began to ripple.
Huh?
Nara paused, wondering what was happening. And then the goblin ran into the ripple and vanished. And Mu rolled out and the ripple vanished.
Mu!
Nara gasped, surprised to see the elusive boy now of all times. Mu didn't respond, instead, he was hunched over on his knees, completely silent. The 3 went over to him and their eyes widened when saw the problem. In order to create the portal for Goblin to enter, Mu had gotten far too close to the flaming Nomu, burning his hand very badly. To the point where it almost didn't resemble a hand anymore. Mu was currently trying to hold back a scream of pain while tears poured from his eyes.
Oh my gosh!
Shiruku went over to him and inspected his hand. But she knew there was nothing she could do about it.
Thud! 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 Thud!
All the kids heard the sound of very heavy footsteps coming toward them.
Oh, what now?
Nara asked, ready to fight whatever was coming at them. However, what they saw was Fu, Sanson, and AKA riding on top of Rhino, who was running toward them.
Guys, we owe.
Fu said once they got close enough to see Mu's messed up hand. Sanson made over-exaggerated wide eyes and AKA just stared at Mu. We couldn't handle the goblin thing on our own. So Mu had to create a portal to defeat it. Shiruku explained curtly. We need to get him to Izuku.
Now.
Right. Fu created some tendrils and got ready to grab Mu. But he was interrupted.
Crash!
Suddenly, Lady Q went flying out of the house's 3rd floor and landed a few yards away from the kids, who could only stare in disbelief at the state she was in. Her clothes were almost completely torn off, she had a massive claw mark on her torso, and both her arms had been ripped off, as was one of her legs. While all the other children were staring on in shock, Fu was staring in confusion, having quickly gotten over his shock. That was the woman Kiba was fighting. But why is she so torn up? That doesn't make any sense. Kiba would never. Fu's thoughts were cut off when suddenly, he heard something slam down behind them. All the kids looked to see what it was, and they saw Kiba, with her head pointed down, in her new transformation. Having jumped out of the hole, Lady Q made to follow her prey.
"K Kiba?"
Shiruku asked, sounding unsure despite the fact that this was obviously Kiba. But she seemed so different that Shiruku was once again in shock. Kiba raised up her head, revealing her reddened, infuriated eyes and her monstrous fangs. Kiba lunged at Lady Q, moving so fast that she looked like a blur, rushing past the other kids and onto Lady Q. The enraged vampire girl raised her arm up and aimed it right at Lady Q's heart. But before she could land the killing blow on her unconscious prey, she was grabbed by one of Kyodon's tendrils and thrown far away into the air. Fu then grabbed Lady Q and brought her to them before looking at the others.
What the hell happened to Kiba?
Ken asked, his eyes still wide in shock at having seen Kiba move so quickly. I don't know, I've never seen her like this, Fu told them before shaking his head. But whatever this is, Kiba doesn't seem like she's in control of herself. We have to calm her down.
Kill.
Thud. Everyone looked behind them to see that Kiba had already returned from wherever Fu had thrown her. Before Kiba could move, Nara kneeled down and raised up a bunch of crystals around Kiba. This held her for all of 1 second as Kiba immediately rushed through the crystal barrier, right at them. Sanson rushed forward and wrapped her body around Kiba to try and slow her down, but Kiba literally went right through her, tearing a hole in Sanson's body as she continued on her path towards Lady Q. She reached the half-dead villain, but before she could attack, Rhino kicked her away, sending Kiba flying back. Kiba rolled through the air, sailing a few inches above the ground, before digging her fingers into the ground and slowing herself before she lunged back at the group. Rhino charged forward, but Kiba just rushed past its legs, knocking it onto its face as she continued to go after Lady Q. Fu sent out more of Kyodon's tendrils and tried to hold Kiba down for a second, but she was too strong and just kept moving towards Lady Q.
Reg.
Ken pushed himself away from his sister and punched the ground as hard as he could, breaking it up and causing Kiba to trip, but Kiba then just started crawling towards them like a feral animal.
Slam.
That's when Sanson came back, having turned herself into a massive hammer, stretching high into the sky before coming down on Kiba with such great force it cratered the ground around them. But Kiba just jumped through Sanson's hammer, launching herself extremely high up in the air. Kiba aimed herself at Lady Q and fell back to the ground. Nara tried shooting more crystal shards at her, but they did absolutely nothing, breaking instantly when they hit her skin. As Kiba got closer, Ken jumped up, past Kiba, and then grabbed her leg, before bringing her down and slamming her body into the ground as hard as he could, breaking apart the brickwork and causing dirt to fly up. This evidently did no damage to Kiba whatsoever, and she immediately yanked her foot out of Ken's hand. She then proceeded to turn around, lunge at Ken, and punch him dead center in the chest.
Shum.
The punch Kiba gave was so strong that it created a gust of wind around it, and everyone could hear Ken's bones break as he flew back.
Crash.
Ken smashed through the side of the house, landing in the inside sports room, unconscious on his back, and in a flash of green Ken returned to his normal form, blood spilling from his mouth.
Ken.
Nara screamed out in horror, but before she could run over to her brother, Kiba charged once again. Shiruka tried to shoot webs at her, but Kiba was too fast and all of her shots missed. Fu and Sanson sent out as many tendrils as they could, creating a wall to try and grab onto Kiba and slow her down. This did barely anything as Kiba rushed through them, only slowing down by a tiny sliver before making it to Fu, who was standing in front of Lady Q. And Kiba moved through him, splatting Fu's body all across the floor. Once again, Kiba was in front of Lady Q, but before she could reach her, Rhino charged in and grabbed her, scooping her up and running a few yards away before planting her on his chest and falling on top of her. Just stay down already. Murder is more trouble than it's worth. AKA shouted at Kiba. You've already tortured her well enough, so calm yourself. Kiba, evidently, did not calm herself as she proceeded to kick Rhino off of her, sending the Nomu, who weighed several tons, flying into the air before crashing down a few yards away onto his back. As Kiba was getting up, Nara stood in front of Lady Q and unleashed a wave of massive crystals at her to try and push her back.
Kill all.
Kiba screamed before she rushed forward, punching through each of the crystals at a terrifying pace, reaching Nara. Kiba then punched a massive hole through her chest and leapt through it. Nara didn't even have time to feel shocked before she was engulfed in pink light and transformed into Wildvine. The hole in her chest quickly healed, and then Nara collapsed, and in another flash, she was back in her human form, unconscious and pale. Kiba meanwhile was now once again closing in on Lady Q, her fangs bared and ready to rip the woman's head off. And then she went limp. Kiba's body landed limply onto Lady Q. Her hair began to fade back into white, her nails receded back to normal and turned back into their normal colors, her muscles shrank and her veins receded, as did her fangs. Lastly, the red cleared from the whites of her eyes before they closed, leaving her unconscious. She passed out, Gayka said as she ran over to Kiba, taking a closer look at her unconscious body along with Sanson. Is it just me or does she look slightly too pale? It's not just you. Fu came over, having grown back everything but his legs, and was using Kyosei's tendrils to keep him up. Her blood tanks are low. Dangerously low. Fu then ripped off one of his arms, held it over Kiba's mouth, and let the blood flow into her. My guess is that whatever this new form was, it used up all the blood Kiba had stored up, way faster than usual, to make her more powerful. Theoise waiter, we have to save everyone. Sanson said, grabbing a hold of Nara, Mu, who had passed out from the pain by now, and Nara. You're right. Fu, grab Kiba and the villain. We need to get them to Izuku. Shiroku told them. I'm not sure how he can help, but it's the best we can do. Back with Yami and Gami, Gami had killed at least a couple hundred Ravagers, but Yami would just keep filling the room back up every time the number of Ravagers started getting too low. Yami himself was currently hiding behind a bookshelf, patiently waiting for the 9 minutes to be up. Well, it looks like you've done it, Gami said as it got closer and closer to being 9 minutes. You guys really are strong, huh? When time is up, you be weak. Ravagers tear you apart. Surrender. Yami told him. Gami smiled. Very well then. Then Gami turned his scythe arm back into a normal arm and raised both his arms up to surrender. Yami peeked his head out from the shelf, parting the swarm of Ravagers slightly so he could see that Gami had properly surrendered. Once he confirmed this, Yami ran out from behind the shelf, parted the Ravagers further, and then shot out one of the licker's tongues at Gami. The tongue wrapped around Gami's body, restraining him completely. As Yami went up to Gami, he saw that Gami was still smiling. Why smile? You lost? Yami asked, very confused as to Gami's attitude. And then Gami started to change. Their body morphed a bit, not too much, but he became more feminine. Their features softened and they became a bit slimmer. Yami also immediately noticed an explosion of emotions within them as the smirk on Gami's face vanished and was replaced with a look of nervous fear. Oh, this is always so unpleasant. Gami cringed, their voice sounding way more feminine than before. Gami then turned their attention back to Yami. Hi? Yami raised an eyebrow. Explain. Meanwhile, Netsa and his Gami were still staring at each other, neither able to attack. Netsa was nearly hyperventilating, struggling to breathe as he burned more and more oxygen. Gami suddenly smirked. Well, it looks like you made it. Congratulations. Huh? Netsa gave him a confused look, very weirded out by his enemy congratulating him. But then Gami's body started to change. Snakes grew out of their head, their face became less pale, their body less masculine, and clothes began to appear over them until Kei had finally returned. Awa. Kei groaned, falling onto her knees, clutching her head. Meanwhile, Netsa finally was able to let down his firewall and rushed out of the room trying to get some more air. It stayed like this for a while, Kei clutching her head, while Netsa was catching his breath in the hallway. Eventually, Kei's headache died down enough for her to pull herself onto her feet. Netsa! I have something really important to tell Dad. But we need to go now before I forget. Okay, Netsa said, still trying to catch his breath. Not too much later, Fu and his group met with Netsu, Yami, Kei, and Gami, who was trying to cover up her naked body, who was no longer bounded, and standing right beside them, much to the surprise of Fu's group, who stopped cautiously a few feet away from them. What happened? Kei gasped when she saw Nara, Ken, Mu, Kiba, and Lady Q. It's a long story, Fu told them, before looking over at Gami, who blushed and hid behind Kei. What's with them? They're on our side, Kei told them firmly, much to the other side's confusion. Just trust me. Yami nodded, confirming that he believed her. Then, the door opened up, with Izuku on the other side. Come quickly. All the kids flooded in and Izuku quickly closed the door behind them. What's he doing here? Fuku gasped, pointing at Gami. And why are they a girl now? I'm actually a girl, I just turned myself into a boy for well it's complicated. Gami explained, her face very red. Please call me Sheena when I'm in this state. It's nice to meet you all. The room was silent, all of the kids except Fu, Kei, Yami, and Netsa glaring at her, making Sheena shrink behind Kei once again. Everyone, we can focus on that later, Izuku told them firmly. Please set down all the injured ones in front of me. Fu nodded, and his group set down Ken, Nara, Mu, Kiba, and Lady Q. Kibe, Mukropka. Fuku went over to look at her two friends unconscious and injured-bodied, tears spilling from her eyes.
Why? Izuku first looked over Lady Q, as her injuries were the worst, by far. Honestly, it's a miracle this woman is still alive. If it weren't for her quirk desperately trying to keep her alive, she'd already be dead. Netsu, can you come over here and burn her injuries? It'll cauterize the wounds. I'm not sure if it'll save her, but it's the best we can do right now. Alright. Netsu agreed, his head still aching from oxygen deprivation, but he did as he was told, heading over to Lady Q and burning her wounds shut. While he did that, Izuku went over to Kiba and looked over her. She's gonna be okay, right? Fuku asked Izuku, her tone had more denial in it than it did hope. She won't die. But she's not gonna be waking up for a while. Izuku told her, his own voice sounding stern and serious, as he pushed back their overwhelming amount of anger and sadness, to better handle the situation. Whatever that form she entered was, it took a toll on her. Not to mention all the wounds this woman inflicted on her. Damn villain. AKA cursed. Wait, you saw her in that form? Shiroku asked, confused as to how Izuku knew about Kiba's transformation despite having been in this room the whole time. Izuku nodded. I saw everything using the cameras and the seers. Well, not everything. I still don't know the situation with Shina, but we can get to that later. For now, Netsu, please seal her wounds shut as well. Netsu nodded, finishing up with Q before going on to Kiba and burning the gashes in her body. Izuku then moved on to Nara. She looks okay, she's just exhausted. My guess is that when Kiba made a hole in her chest dash. Kiba did what? Netsu asked in pure shock. Kiba punched a hole in her chest, but my guess is that Nara's quirk reacted, forcefully transforming her into Wildvine to repair the damage before she died. Izuku theorized. But switching from transformation to transformation must a toll on her. There's nothing we can do right now, other than giving her some time to rest and get her to a hospital as soon as this is over. Izuku then moved on to Ken, whose breathing was labored, blood was still coming out of his mouth, and his face was still heavily burnt from the goblin's fire breath. As for Ken, I'm not sure exactly, but Kiba likely broke a few of his ribs, he might even be bleeding internally. And the burns? Damn it, he needs immediate medical attention, but there's no way to get him out of here in time. Damn me, I should have hired a nurse by now. Then he looked over at Mu. And Mu. Most of his hand is gone, damn it. While Izuku was looking over the injured, Eri just stood in the back, watching, her fist tightening more and more with each person Izuku assessed. And maybe I can turn Ken to stone, so he'll be frozen until we can get him to a hospital, Kei suggested. That might work, but we'll have to get his eyes open, Izuku said. I'm so sorry, Ashina said, causing everyone to look over at her, as she hung her head in shame. I could have stopped all of this from happening if only I'd killed my stupidity. There was a short pause after that before Izuku got up and walked towards her, moving Kei aside gently and then kneeling down to look at her face to face. I would like you to explain yourself, please. Okowo. Shina took a deep breath before looking back up at Izuku nervously. My name is Shina. And I work for the MLA. The Meta Liberation Army. Or at least I was forced to. What's a Meta Liberation Army? Kei asked curiously. It was a large group of people who believed that quirks should dominate society. They believed that quirks should be free to use as people pleased, and many people within that group were quirk supremacists, who believed that a person's quirk should dictate their role in society. Izuku explained. Some even believed that people with villainous quirks or the quirkless should be killed, for the sake of ensuring their genes don't pass on to others. They were supposed to have been destroyed a long time ago, but it's fully possible that someone else brought it back. And if that's the case, it would explain who's been trying to kill me for all this time. So these are the same people that sent Nies and that gunman, Fu concluded. Shina nodded. They've really wanted you dead a while. The thought of quirkless having power over people with powerful quirks, or having power at all, makes them really, really angry. So it's an army of quirkist scum? AKA spat. TCH. When I get my hands on them, I swear they will regret what they've done. My parents were a part of the MLA and forced me to be too. Shina continued her explanation with a saddened look on her face. When my quirk came in, more powerful members took interest in me. And they wanted me to take people's lives. Once again, Izuku fought the rising feelings of anger, sadness, and utter disgust. Right now he needed to hear Shina's explanation out all the way through, as quickly as possible. I didn't want to do it. I couldn't do it.
Taking a life makes me sick. Sheena admitted, her face going slightly green as she was no doubt thinking about the people she was forced to kill. But then, they made me become gammy. They told me to kill my emotions, my ethics, and my gender. I think that last one was just because they wanted a boy, but they made me do it anyway. And so, after I do all that, I can take a life. But you still feel the disgust after you turn back, Izuku said. Sheena nodded, looking away from Izuku so he couldn't see the guilt in her eyes. I wanted to stop, but they wouldn't let me. They said that this was all for my sake, that I was creating a better world for people like me. But they're just liars. They just want a better world for themselves. I've been looking for a way out for a long time now, and when I heard about this place I knew that this was my chance. You're taking in strong kids with no parents. And my parents are dead to me, so I thought if I helped you, you'd take me in and protect me from the MLA. Then why did you attack us? Fu asked, crossing his arm and giving her a confused look. Sheena looked down again. Well, when I'm gammy. Sometimes I don't do things I normally would. I saw all the powerful forces on the villain's side, and Gammy decided that I needed to test you to see if you could actually win this. Because I betrayed them and we lost. I can't imagine what the consequences would be, Izuku said, finishing her sentence, before putting an arm on her shoulder. It's okay. I get it. You weren't yourself, or rather you were forced to become something that's not yourself. I can't blame you any more than I can blame Kiba for going berserk. But I could have done something, even if I just remembered to kill my own stupidity. I could have realized that I was making our side weaker, Sheena said tearfully, rubbing her skull-like eyes to get rid of the tears. I'm so stupid. Speaking of our side, we need to go back out there, Fu said. Izuku turned around to face Fu and was about to open his mouth when Fu sent one of Kyoseai's tendrils out and grabbed the seer that was in the room. Show us what's happening outside. The seer did as instructed, and everyone crowded around it to see. Sai was struggling against the combined force of Kurogiri and Konoshiro. Konoshiro unleashed a bolt of energy at Sai, who dodged it, only for Kurogiri to open a portal behind her, and then above her, consuming the energy bolt and transferring it so it struck Sai. Sai screamed in pain as the energy hit her. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked exhausted, breathing heavily, as Weaver approached him with a grin. All popped out, mister? Weaver giggled. Why don't I help you take a nap? Kai was currently fighting Hood and getting beat to hell, his body covered in bruises and many of his scales having been knocked off him as Hood flew around him at overwhelming speeds and smacked him repeatedly. Sori was currently on the defensive for once as she leaped forward to avoid Hit, attacking her from behind, only for Hit to show up behind her again as soon as she landed, once again trying to attack her, but Sori barely managed to dodge by dashing to the side, this time Hit not following. It seems Sori had finally gotten some grasp of Hit's quirk, but she was also covered in bruises, and blood was leaking from her mouth, while Hit didn't have a scratch on him. So the battle was still very much in his favor. Lastly, All Might and Ruin were charging at each other, but Janemba's arms grabbed All Might's arms and held him back, taking All Might by surprise and allowing Ruin to get in a blow to the face. Egg! All Might yelled as blood sprayed from his mouth and nose. The hit sent him flying to the side. That thing beat the hound, Yami noted. Kai's getting beat up by that flying hooded thing. Kei cried. Even All Might's struggling, Netsu said, shocked to see the number 1 hero on the back foot. Now show us 1A, Fu ordered. The seer changed the image to show 1A fighting the former Yakuza members in the entry hall. Kirishima, Tsu, and Achiko were fighting against Rappa. Achiko tried to attack him from above, but Rappa unleashed a flurry of punches above his head and sent Achiko flying into the ceiling. Meanwhile, Kirishima and Tsu came at him from the front and from behind, but Rappa just punched them both back. Todoroki, Tokoyami, Mineta, and Ida were currently facing off against Rikiya. Todoroki sent out a wave of ice at the massive villain, but he just punched through it all, and Todoroki had to move back with his ice to avoid Rikiya's fist slamming him into the ground. Dark Shadow charged at him, but Rikiya just backhanded it away, before raising his hand up to his face, to block some balls that Mineta was throwing at him from above. Rikiya tore a chunk out of the wall and threw it at Mineta, but Ida managed to get him out of the way before it hit him. Ojiro and Aoyama were fighting Coronastasis, Ojiro jumping around to avoid Chrono's hair attacks, while Aoyama took pot shots at Chrono, but the villain easily dodged Aoyama's attacks. Meanwhile, Sato, Shoji, and Siro were trying to fight off against Setsuno, Tabe, and Hojo.
Shoji made multiple arms and unleashed them to try and hit Setsuno, but Hojo jumped in front of him, defending his friend with his crystal-covered arms, nullifying Shoji's attack, before Tabe came in and started devouring Shoji's arm, running towards the multi-limbed boy as he ate up his arms. Shiro tried to shoot tape at Tabe, but Setsuno stole the tape out of his arm. Tabe got closer and closer to Shoji, his maw threatening to bite into the boy's chest, but then Sato came in and punched Tabe back. And while all this was going on, Momo and Jiro were on the side, Jiro having had her support items stolen by Setsuno, so she was helping Momo tend to the wounded, Koda, Mina, Kaminari, and Toru. Izuku could clearly see that things weren't going well. At this rate, if nothing changed then their side would lose. "Dad, I know you want to keep us safe, but if they go down, then we're screwed," Fu told him. "Those doors won't be able to protect us, not when they have someone who can open portals as he pleases. We need to help them win. It's our only hope." Izuku knew he was right, but he couldn't help but argue. "But you're all weakened. Ken, Nara, Kiba, and Mu are all out of commission. Netsu is still recovering from oxygen deprivation, you've used up a good amount of your meat storage, Shiruka's exhausted, the only ones who are still in good shape are Sanson, aka Yami, and Shina." "I know, but we don't have a choice." Fu reiterated. Sniff. "I'm sorry." Suddenly, everyone turned their attention to Eri at the back of the room, who was now crying tears of frustration and self-loathing. "If I could just control my quirk." Eri sobbed. "I could fix this. I'm sorry." Immediately, Izuku, Fuku, Kei, and Kyoku all went over and hugged Eri. "It's okay," Izuku told her. "You've been trying your best to get control over your quirk. We know you have. It's not your fault. I wish I had a quirk so that way I could defend you all and not just sit on the side." "I'm sorry." Actually, Shina spoke up, getting everyone's attention. "I can help with both of those problems." Aoyama had many regrets. He regretted complaining to his parents so much about his quirklessness. He regretted telling All for One about how long they were staying at the Midoriya Foundation. And right now he regretted not getting farther away from chronostasis. Everything slowed for Aoyama. Ojiro had been hit by the villain's quirk and was slowed down for real. And now, Chrono's hair arrow was headed to impale his face. Aoyama was falling backward, he couldn't dodge. This was it, he was going to die? Perhaps this is for the best. Aoyama thought as his impending doom got closer and closer. With this, the UA traitor dies. An unglamorous, bloody death? It's what I deserve. Just please someone save the others. They don't deserve my fate. Chrono's arrow came inches towards Aoyama's face. And then, something pushed him to the left. Aoyama hit the side of the second-floor guardrail and was on the ground as Chrono's arrow missed him completely. "What?" Chrono shouted in confusion as he recalled his hair. "Chronostasis." Everyone looked down the hall and saw Izuku walking toward them. "I think you've done enough," Izuku said, glaring harshly at Chrono. Boom! Suddenly Izuku shot toward Chrono at unreal speeds, closing the distance between him and Chrono in less than a second and punching him in the gut. "Eck!" Chrono groaned as the force of Izuku's punch winded him. "Aftershock." Izuku said. "Shum." Chrono went flying off of Izuku's fist and into the opposite wall. What?" Chrono grunted as he pulled himself out of the wall and onto his feet, clutching his gut as he tried to process what just happened. "How did you dash?" "It's my new quirk," Izuku explained, casually walking up to Chrono. "It's called Repel. It allows me to repel myself away from things or repel things away from me. That includes the air, by the way, which is how I did that little dash. And that punch was for Eri." "Shum." Izuku repelled himself off of the air behind him and dashed right over to Chrono in the blink of an eye. "And so are these." "Piston onslaught." The green teen then unleashed a flurry of blows to Chrono's face, stomach and chest. With each punch, he repelled his elbows against the air, thrusting his arm forward into Chrono, before repelling it off of Chrono, to quickly repeat the process, allowing Izuku to unleash over 30 punches in the span of 3 seconds. Chrono, now heavily bruised and very dazed, could only try and thrust his arrow hair at Izuku, but Izuku repelled it away from him, causing it to fly around Izuku's head. Izuku then grabbed Chrono, spun him to the opposite side of him, and then kicked him, repelling Chrono's body away from his foot, causing him to fly forward and fall on his face. "Honestly, I'd like to keep hitting you as payback for Eri, but I need to get some payback for my other kids as well." Izuku walked over to Chrono menacingly. You better prepare yourself. Because this is going to hurt.
Gah!
Kirishima cried out in pain, blood flying from his mouth as he was sent flying back from another one of Rappa's assaults. The red-clad hero in training collapsed onto the ground, falling unconscious as he bled all over the floor.
Is that it?
Rappa asked as both Tsu and Achiko stood in front of him. Both of them were badly bloodied and bruised, but still standing to fight.
I was told I was gonna get a good fight? But this is light work.
Tsu looked back at Kirishima's unconscious form before giving Achiko an apologetic look.
I have to get him to Momo.
He's gonna die if he stays on the battlefield. Achiko trembled for a moment. She knew what that meant. That she'd have to fight this monster alone. Okay. Just be careful. Don't let anyone hit you on your way there.
Right, Karo.
Tsu croaked before grabbing Kirishima with her tongue and leaping away. Leaving Achiko alone to stand off against Rappa.
Come on, girlie. Show me some real power.
Rappa urged her as he walked up to her, ready to unleash another flurry of blows. You want power? Achiko grit her teeth, both out of anger, and to prepare herself for the pain that was about to come as she powered up one for all to 100%, focusing it in her right arm. I'll give you power. Achiko reeled her arm back and Rappa charged forward, both of them ready to unleash devastating attacks. Until Kiba flew in and kicked Rappa in the head.
Gah?
Rappa, completely taken off guard, was launched to the left through one of the walls. Kiba flipped through the air before landing on her feet. The Queen of Eternal Darkness has returned.
To send you all to the abyss. Kiba?
Achiko shouted out in shock as she powered down one for all, back into 18% full cowling.
What are you, Dash?
The seers showed us how your fight was progressing and we saw you all were struggling. So Father allowed us to aid you. Kiba explained.
What the hell was that?
Rappa complained as he got out of the wall and walked back towards them, clutching his now aching head. If you're gonna join in the fight, do it the real way. Sneak attacks are for cowards. Snap. Suddenly Kyosei's tendrils sprang out from the floor underneath Rappa and wrapped around his arms, keeping him from moving. Then I guess I'm a coward, Fu said as he popped up from behind Rappa. Ladies? If you would. Achiko looked at Kiba and the two of them smiled before looking at Rappa.
Hey, this ain't a real fight.
Don't dash. Rappa didn't get a chance to finish his sentence as both Kiba and Achiko rushed forward and unleashed a flurry of blows on the villain's chest.
Shum.
Rappa was sent flying back, once again through another wall, ending up in one of the nearby rooms, completely unconscious. Serves him right, Achiko smirked, happy to have finally taken down one of the Yakuza thugs. Kiba raised her hand towards Achiko and Achiko high-fived her. Oh. Mineta groaned as he and Ida laid on the ground, completely exhausted. Todoroki and Tokoyami had been thrown to opposite sides and now Rikiya was looking down on Mineta's helpless form. You know, I always wondered if I could squish a person like a bug. Rikiya grinned as he raised his foot up over Mineta. Mineta couldn't move, so much of his vitality had been drained that he could do was close his eyes and hope he was taller in his next life.
Hey, buzz off. Splat. 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 Splat.
Suddenly, Ken flew in a stinkfly and shot goop right in Rikiya's face, covering his eyes in green smelly slime.
Ah. Shit.
Rikiya cursed as he stumbled backward, trying to pull the goop off his face, only to get it stuck to his hands as well. Once Rikiya had moved back a few feet, Ken looked up at Netsu who was flying above them.
Now.
HAA. Netsu aimed down and unleashed a powerful fire blast that engulfed Rikiya's massive body completely. When the attack ended, Rikiya was on the ground, his body burnt and fire surrounding him, but he was still conscious.
Gah.
You little dash. It was then that Nara jumped down from the second floor in front of Rikiya and let out a massive ice blast, putting out the fires and freezing Rikiya completely, and now he was too weak to break out.
Oh, thank God.
Mineta cried, literally crying tears of joy.
Thank you.
I didn't want to die a virgin. Mineta. That is an inappropriate thing to say to children. Ida scolded him. Ken flew down and grabbed Mineta and Ida. Alright, let's get you guys to Eri. It's time for a counterattack. Sato grit his teeth. Currently, he was holding onto an unconscious Shoji and Siro, both of whom had chunks taken out of their arms. He was backed up against a wall while the trash trio Setsuno, Hojo, and Tabe closed in on him.
"Alright kid," Setsuno said before pulling out a gun. "Time for you to slash." Suddenly, Shina, who had returned to her Gami form and was thankfully given some of Fuku's clothes, dashed out from nowhere and slashed each of their backs with his scythe. None of the three even had the chance to cry out, before they all immediately dropped to the floor. Gami stood over the bodies, looking down to make sure his work was done before looking up at Sato.
"Hey thanks, kid, but I don't think I've seen you around here before," Sato said, squinting at the kid to see if he could recognize them.
"I'm new," Gami said simply. "Now let's go. Eri's waiting."
These guys aren't breathing," Sato noted nervously as he looked over the bodies of the trash trio.
"That's because they're dead.
At least for the next 9 minutes," Gami told him, causing Sato to give him a confused and shocked look. "Now come on, if one of those two bleeds out, there's nothing Eri can do to help them." Ekrano grunted as he barely was able to stand. His body was covered with bruises, his face was swollen, and blood was pouring out of his mouth, nose, and busted chin.
"This doesn't make any sense. How did you get a quirk?"
Izuku stood in front of him nonchalantly.
"Let's just say you brought on yourself."
Speaking of which, the two of them heard footsteps rush towards them, and before Chrono's dazed mind could process what was happened, he was surrounded by the kids, except the non-combatant ones, and almost all of 1A. All of whom were completely fine. Not a wound on them, they didn't even look exhausted. How Chrono stopped himself when he quickly realized the answer to his question and spotted Eri hiding behind Momo's legs.
You ruin everything, you little smash."
Before Chrono could finish his sentence, Izuku rushed forward and gave him one last, strong punch to the face, laying him out on the floor unconscious. "Never speak to my daughter like that again," Izuku said as he clutched his hand, which hurt slightly due to the force of his punch.
"Woohoo."
"Yeah."
Both the class and the kids cheered at the final former member of the Yakuza getting what he deserved.
"Is everyone okay?"
Izuku asked, looking around to make sure everyone was fine and accounted for.
"It appears so, but we seem to have lost track of Shinso," Momo said, not seeing the sleep-deprived boy anywhere.
"Right here," Shinso said, walking out from the hallway, dragging an unconscious Didoro with him, wrapped up in his capture scarf. "Figured this guy would make the battle harder for everyone, so isolated him."
"You took on one of those guys on your own."
"That's manly as hell,"
Kirishima praised. "Fighting him honestly wasn't that hard, just tedious and nauseating." Shino grimaced. "He was too drunk to realize how my quirk worked, or he was too drunk to get himself to stop talking, so he kept triggering my quirk. Although it seems like you guys had an even easier time. None of you have so much as a scratch."
"That'd be thanks to our favorite unicorn."
Mina cheered, picking up Eri and hugging her tightly, causing the monohorn girl to blush heavily.
"Yeah, you really saved our asses, guys. Great job,"
Kaminari said, praising all of the kids.
"But how did you do the dash attack thing on him?"
Achiko asked Izuku. "And how did Eri suddenly learn how to control her quirk?" "That would be thanks to our newest addition," Izuku said, looking over to Gami who was standing over to the side.
"Where did he come from?"
Toru asked, not recognizing the boy. "It's a long story." Izuku sighed, not wanting to explain that whole situation. "But this is Gami or Shina, but just for now call them Gami. Their quirk makes it so that when they hit something with their scythe, they can kill that person or any part or aspect of that person. Even things like quirklessness and inexperience."
"Wait, so he just gave a quirk?"
Kaminari shouted in shock. Izuku nodded.
"Right. How does it feel?"
Shinso asked him curiously.
"To finally have one?"
Izuku looked down at himself.
"Bittersweet.
For a lot of reasons. But I'm glad I can finally help fight and protect my children. Like a real father should." Achiko was about to tell him that even without a quirk he was protecting his children, but Fu spoke up first. "Speaking of fighting, we need to get out there and help," Fu said sternly. Izuku nodded. "We saw what was happening through the seers. And it's not going well. We need to help them as soon as possible or we're going to lose. I don't feel like fighting a monster capable of fighting All Might without All Might," Fu added. "But how do we fight that thing even with All Might?" Jiro asked. "Just the wind they make from fighting keeps us from getting close." That may be the case for now, but I know someone who'll one day be able to keep up with, if not surpass All Might, Izuku said, before looking at Achiko. And thanks to Gami, we won't have to wait as long to see it happen. Kai wanted to lay down. He wanted to just collapse and stop fighting. Hood was beating him badly. Kai had never been in so much pain before. And his body was begging him to just give up. But Kai stood his ground on shaky legs. Because if this thing beat him, then it would go after everyone else. And he couldn't let that happen. Once again, Kai's head rushed forward and tried to bite at Hood, but Hood once again easily dodged his attack. Weak, Hood said as he got ready to attack Kai once more.
Shum.
And then suddenly, Achiko zipped in behind Hood, coming out of seemingly nowhere, with pink lightning cascading off her body and her hair raised up from all the energy. Jupiter smash! Crack 'em! With the power of 100% full cowling, Achiko punched Hood, and Hood went flying towards the ground like a lightning bolt. Boom! Hood hit the ground so hard it created a small earthquake. The impact caused the earth to distort like a wave, rising up and moving out of the way. The Noma was left in the middle of a massive crater, most of its body either annihilated or utterly crippled. And while it was regenerating, Nara came in as XLR8 and stuck a piece of AKA inside him.
What?
Hood said as AKA started taking over its mind. Soon its eyes turned blue and it finished regenerating. It came under AKA's full control. Ahahaha.
Yeses.
AKA/Hood cackled.
So much power.
AKA?
Is that you?
Kai asked, looking down at the mind-controlled Nomo. That's right. Don't worry, I'll make them suffer for you. Just rest now.
Ahahaha.
AKA/Hood cackled evilly. Thanks, Kai said tiredly, before he collapsed onto the ground, creating another small earthquake as he let himself fall into unconsciousness. Nara rushed in with Eri under her arm, setting her down next to Kai. Eri immediately touched Kai's neck and activated her quirk. Kai's body was enveloped in a green glow, and within a second, all of Kai's wounds were healed. You really are just the most overpowered thing on Earth in a tiny package, huh? Nara said, looking at Kai's fully healed body. Eri blushed once again.
Let's keep going.
We need to heal everyone. Sai really wished she'd gone all out at the beginning. Currently, she was struggling to stand, with Konosuke staring her down. Kurogyri was off to the side, and with him there, her options both in offense and defense were drastically reduced. TCH, really wish I could have done this without the unwanted third party, but Konosuke grabbed her sword with both hands and held it up towards the sky before pouring a massive amount of energy into it, causing the energy to erupt into the sky like a beacon. This is where it ends, father. Kurogyri looked closely, ready to create a portal if Sai tried anything. Too bad all the looking around in the world wouldn't have prepared him for what was next.
Ugh.
Kurogyri suddenly cried out in pain as something hit him in the stomach, causing him to stumble back.
Huh?
Konosuke and Sai looked over at Kurogyri, wondering what just happened.
Waga.
Kurogyri cried as he was attacked multiple times by that same invisible force. Hagakure. Sai's eyes widened as she realized what was going on. She had an opening. With Kurogyri distracted, Sai opened up a bunch of portals high above Konosuke, as many as she could, before shooting explosive swords out of them down at Konosuke. Hell's rain. Kanashi's eyes widened, and by the time she looked up, the swords were already on her.
Kaboom.
Konosuke was swallowed in an absolutely massive explosion that shook the earth and scorched the ground, and everyone around had to look away so as not to be blinded. And when it died down, Konosuke was on the ground, unconscious and badly burnt. Eck. Sai collapsed onto one knee, utterly exhausted. Thank you, Hagakure. You're welcome. Toru shouted back, seemingly giving away her position in front of Kurogyri. Foolish girl you have. Kurogyri was about to open a portal underneath the girl when he heard Shigaraki speak to him.
Why haven't you finished her off yet?
Asked Shigaraki's voice impatiently behind him. I am trying. Kurogyri didn't get to finish his sentence as suddenly he lost all control over his body. Because the person speaking behind him wasn't Shigaraki, it was Shinso using his voice modifier. Finally, I got this pain in the ass off the board, Shinso said. Now, it's time we wrap things up. Hit stared at his weakened opponent. Sori was down on one knee and panting with exhaustion, her body covered in wounds. This fight is over. Hit said, before disappearing and showing up behind Sori, ready to strike her in the back of the head. And then he felt his legs being swept from under him.
What?
Hit's eyes widened as he fell to the floor and activated his quirk, stopping time before Sori could get in a counterattack. He rolled off the floor and jumped back onto his feet, a good distance away from Sori, before deactivating his quirk. And then immediately getting a kick to the stomach.
Gah!
Hit cried as Sori's foot impacted him so hard, blood came flying out of his mouth, and he skidded back a few feet. Hit clutched his stomach and looked up at Sori, who was smirking confidently at him.
How?
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out your quirk. Sori chuckled. Here's my guess, your quirk stops time, but it's pretty exhausting to use, which is why you only use it for a few seconds and keep taking breaks in between your assaults. You also can't actually hit anything while time is stopped, which is why you only start the attack during stop time but finish it in regular time.
So, what do you think?
She figured out my quirk so easily. Hit thought, staring down Sori with a calm and collected look, although he was starting to get a bit nervous. Just a little bit. Hit then looked around, taking a good look at how the tide of battle was flowing. He didn't like the idea of abandoning his employers, even if he didn't like them. After all, a hitman with a reputation for flaking was a hitman that didn't get hired. But his reputation to take this, and he wasn't particularly fond of this assignment anyway. Then he looked back at Sori and exited his combat stance. Alright, I can see where this is going. And as much as I hate to flake out on a customer, I'm not one to stay with a sinking ship either.
Don't tell me you're gonna run away.
Sori smirked.
Things were just getting good.
Afraid so. Hit said, before smirking a bit. I'll admit though, it's been a while since I've had a good fight. Maybe we'll meet again sometime. And with that he vanished. Sori stayed alert, trying to make sure he didn't try a sneak attack, but after a minute she concluded that he really did leave.
Humph.
Can't wait for round 2. Sori muttered under her breath, before moving on to take out more villains. Ack, Aizawa grunted as he too was standing on shaky legs. His body was covered in bruises. And his eyes hurt so much. He couldn't even use his quirk. Which meant Weaver was free to use hers. Well, this was pretty dull, mister, Weaver said, as her hands restitched themselves into swords, and she approached Aizawa. So I'm just gonna end this now, so I can play with the OP whatever.
K?
Out of all the people that could end up killing me. It's a little girl in a pink dress. Aizawa thought. Yeah, that sounds like how my life would go. Weaver got close and raised her sword up, ready to go for the kill. Vroom. When suddenly Ida came running by, with Gammy in his arm, and he slashed into Weaver's back, creating a small gash. Wadash, Weaver didn't even get the chance to finish her sentence before the light vanished from her eyes, and she fell to the ground. Dead. Ida came running back towards Aizawa and slowed to a stop in front of his teacher. You came back, Aizawa grunted, trying not to collapse in front of his student. Why? Because you were losing, Agami said bluntly. I apologize, sensei, but he's right. As heroes in training, we simply wouldn't allow you all to die. Ida reasoned. And also, if you all were to lose, then our chances of survival would lower significantly. Aizawa couldn't argue against that. But he didn't want to praise them for going against his orders either. Eri will be here momentarily to heal your wounds, just hold on just a bit longer, sensei. Ida told him before he started to rev his engines. And stop acting tough, Gammy advised before he and Ida sped away towards his next objective. Ugh. Aizawa collapsed onto one of his knees. Smartass kid. Boom. 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 Nemesis was just blasting hordes of oncoming Grim, blowing them up in dozens as they poured in from the forest. And then, in a flash, he was completely engulfed in ice. Crack! 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 Smash! Although it didn't stay confined for long, very quickly Nemesis used his overwhelming strength to break its top half free of the ice, although its legs were still frozen over. However, this gave time for Ken, in his Heat Blast form, Todoroki, and Netsu, to all gather in a triangle formation around Nemesis. Kaboom! All three of them unleashed their most powerful fire attacks, right at Nemesis, engulfing the monster completely, in fire so hot it'd make Endeavor feel insecure. After a few minutes of unleashing hell, the three of them stopped and looked at the massive inferno they had created. Hey, you're sure these things aren't alive, right? Ken asked, sounding a little nervous. Yeah, Yonda and AKA said that these things don't really have minds. Except for that purple one and the hooded one. Netsu confirmed. Oh sweet. Ken breathed a sigh of relief. Grrrr. All Might grunted as he held off Ruin as the two were locked, hand in hand, in a contest of strength. All Might was stronger for sure. But he'd taken quite a lot of damage and used up a lot of his power, while Ruin was good as new thanks to his shock absorption and regeneration.
Bam. Eck.
All Might grunted as he felt something hit his back. He looked behind him and saw Janemba cackling evilly before he started rapidly hitting All Might in the back from a distance, extending his arms to hit the symbol of peace from a few yards away.
Bam. 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 Bam.
Hit after hit assailed All Might's back, and while Janemba's bunches didn't hurt all that much, they stung more than anything. They were really distracting, and they were allowing Ruin to start winning the contest of strength. Egg. All Might clenched his teeth hard as Ruin started pushing him back.
Ehihei.
Janemba cackled as he gleefully kept up his assault. And then Kiba flew in and kicked him in the side of the head.
Egg.
Janemba let out a high-pitched cry as he was flung to the side, away from All Might's battle.
Why young Kiba?
All Might cried out in surprise. Humph, looks like you can't super armor your way through this problem, All Might. Kiba remarked.
But have no fear, we have come to assist you.
We? All Might asked. And then, 100% Uraraka came barreling through and grabbed Ruin, taking away its gravity and then throwing it aside. Young Uraraka? All Might gasped, shocked to see Achiko exhibit such speed and power out of the blue.
No time to explain. I can use 100% of one for all for like 7 more minutes.
Achiko quickly filled All Might in. We need to create a cut in this thing.
Even a small one will do.
A small cut may not work. This monster seems to have regeneration properties. All Might told her. It'll heal before you know it.
Rah.
Ruin came running back at both of them, but All Might and Achiko were ready.
Smash.
Both of them rushed at the Nomu and punched it in the chest at the same time. Its shock absorption couldn't handle that amount of force, and blood spilled from its beak-like mouth before it went flying back, flailing across the ground.
If all else fails, then just hit it harder.
All Might laughed. Achiko sighed.
You would say that.
Meanwhile, Janemba got back on his feet, looking absolutely pissed.
Grrrr. Hey there. Huh?
Janemba looked behind them to see Hood flying a few feet above him.
Why don't you play with us?
Ehehehe. Hood / aka cackled.
Stomp. Stomp. Stomp.
Janemba looked back to his other side to see Rhino / aka staring him down. Kiba landed onto Rhino's head and looked down at Janemba with a confident smirk. Prepare to feel the consequences for invading a queen's castle.
No, no, no. 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 No.
Shigaraki started rapidly scratching his neck as he saw his plan fall apart in front of him as his minions either fled, fell, or were taken under enemy control. So, you're the one behind all this. Shigaraki froze before looking behind him to see Izuku glaring daggers at him. Izuku Midoriya.
And who exactly are you?
Izuku asked, his glare hardening. My name is Tamura Shigaraki, leader of the League of Villains. Shigaraki introduced himself. And I was just looking for someone to kill. Well, you're about as unpleasant as I thought, Izuku said. Meaning, I have no need to hold back.
Shum.
Suddenly, Izuku dashed in front of Shigaraki, around and behind him, faster than Shigaraki could react, before striking him in the back and then repelling him off of his fist.
AJCK?
Shigaraki cried out in pain and surprise as he was sent flying, smacking against the gates.
What the dash?
Izuku then dashed forward, grabbed Shigaraki's shirt, and yanked the villain in front of him.
Eagle uppercut.
Then Izuku uppercut Shigaraki, and then repelled Shigaraki's chin away from his fist, causing Shigaraki to fly up into the air. Izuku then repelled himself off the ground, repelling himself off the air under him as he rose, making him fly like a rocket above Shigaraki. Thunder strike, Izuku cried as he raised his foot above Shigaraki.
Axe kick?
Boom! Izuku axe-kicked Shigaraki while Max repelled Shigaraki, causing the villain to crash down to the ground like a bolt of lightning, making a small crater as he landed. Agho Shigaraki spat out blood as the wind was knocked from his body and he felt his bones break from the impact. And it only got worse as Izuku repelled himself down at max speed and knee Shigaraki in the gut so hard buried him even deeper into the ground. The last thing Shigaraki saw before he passed out was Izuku's emerald green eyes staring down at him. Ochako and All Might were absolutely demolishing Ruin, the two of them rushing him and hitting him with synchronized attacks, overwhelming its shock absorption and its regeneration as they beat the artificial monster all around the yard.
Slam!
Ruin crashed down into the dirt, creating a massive crater and kicking up huge clouds of dirt.
Reg!
Ruin groaned weakly as its regeneration tried to keep up and heal its wounds. As Ruin got onto its legs suddenly, half its body was frozen over by Todoroki.
Uraraka!
Now! Todoroki shouted at his classmate.
Right. All Might! Break it open!
Ochako told her teacher.
All right.
All Might charged forward and smashed through the iced-over part of the Nomu, destroying half of its body. Ochako then rushed forward, taking a piece of AKA out of her pocket and shoving it in its regenerating bloodstream. As Ruin's body finished regenerating, its eyes turned blue and it stopped moving.
AKA?
Ochako hesitantly walked up to the beast. Are you in control? Ruin/AKA nodded, still unable to speak with this body.
Phew.
Ochako wiped her forehead before turning to Todoroki and giving him a thumbs up. Young Uraraka, I'm afraid I'm a bit confused? All Might walked up to Ochako with a confused expression. Oh right, you don't know about AKA, Ochako said. Well, just know that we have this thing under control now. I'll explain after we dash.
Ga.
Everyone looked over to the side to see Janemba laid out on the ground, covered in wounds. And in front of him were Hood, Rhino, Kiba, and Aizawa now fully healed and using his quirk to keep Janemba from breaking itself up, stretching, or regenerating.
Groshgerer.
Janemba growled as it got back up to its feet. And then Ruin/AKA rushed over behind it and grabbed it by its arms.
Oh. Ga.
Raf.
Edge.
Janemba struggled to try and escape Ruin's grip, but it was a fruitless effort. Kiba grinned as she took a piece of AKA out of her pocket and walked up to Janemba. The vampiric girl shoved the piece into one of the cuts on Janemba's body.
Egg.
Janemba cried out as he felt AKA crawl up its body and into its brain. Soon enough, its eyes turned blue and its face broke out into a twisted smile once more. Ahaha. Now all those who would stand in our way have been defeated.
Ahaha.
Janemba/AKA laughed evilly. Are we sure that's a good thing? All Might asked as he looked at the evilly cackling Nomu.
Yep.
Ochako sighed as she powered down.
That's just how she is. If you say so.
All Might shrugged.
Whoa-wee-wheel.
That's when they heard the sound of police cars and helicopters roll in.
This is the police. All villains stand down immediately,
announced one of the helicopters.
You are under arrest.
Amazing how they show up after we've finished off all the villains, Shoto noted. Get used to that, young Todoroki. All Might chuckled. Get used to that. It had been 8 hours after the event and the kids, as well as both Sori and Sai, were all standing in front of Izuku, who was sitting on the steps of the facility, with Shina standing behind him. Alright. I'm going to explain everything in the simplest way possible. Izuku announced as everyone looked at him attentively. Earlier today, we were attacked by 2 villain organizations. One is the League of Villains and the other is the Meta Liberation Army. The League of Villains. What a stupid name. Yonda rolled her eyes at the childishness of that name. The League of Villains is a seemingly recently founded villain organization. Not much is known about them, other than they had the ability to create artificial creatures that we've figured out are called Nomu. Izuku explained. Which are those creatures AKA took control over earlier?
So are they like Yami's Grim?
Nara asked curiously. Izuku shook his head.
No.
Yami's Grim are quirk-made beings, born from nothing but energy with no minds or will of their own. The Nomu, on the other hand, seem to have been people heavily altered by some sort of experiments. Some of which retain some level of their sense of self, but others appear to be mindless monsters. Looks of disgust spread among the crowd, and Eri turned visibly pale as the thought of human experiments hit a bit too close to home. Again, we still don't know much about them. Izuku continued. The Nomuaka captured have been taken by the government for study. I doubt we'll need to worry about them again, however. The leader of the League, Tamura Shigaraki, as well as assistant Kurojiri, were both mysteriously transported away while they were being escorted to prison.
What?
Shouted pretty much everyone, Shina, Sori, and Sai included, all staring at him with fear and shock in their eyes. As concerning as this is, I don't think we'll have to worry too much about them, Izuku reassured them, keeping his calm and collected tone. From what we can tell from the interrogations, the League themselves didn't seem to care too much about us. Rather, they were here for All Might. They knew All Might would be here, so we ended up being caught up in their attack. Although there is still the risk of them seeking revenge for what happened, considering All Might is still alive, it's more likely they'll focus their efforts on him. What's more concerning, however, is the Meta Liberation Army. The Meta Liberation Army, to think such abhorrent group could still exist. Sai spat out with disgust.
What's a Meta Liberation Army?
Sori asked curiously. I'll re-explain it for those who don't know. Izuku cleared his throat. The Meta Liberation Army is a group that came into existence after quirks started to become more widespread and normalized, as well as more regulated. Some people viewed these regulations as against human rights, and one man, known as Destro, radicalized the people into fighting against the government to try and create a more quirk-centric system. Thus the Meta Liberation Army was born. Given that the Meta Liberation Army put great value on quirks, they quickly began to view them as the most important thing to a person. Deciding that a quirk should decide how much value a person has. Those with stronger quirks should be in a higher class than those with weaker ones, and those with no quirks should be below them. It gets more complicated, as some people are more radical in believing that those with villainous quirks, weaker quirks, or the quirkless should be outright killed. Yami could see the anger rising in many of his siblings as Izuku continued explaining this horrible group. But in particular, he kept his eyes on Kiba. She was livid right now and tightening her fist to the point where Yami was worried she'd draw blood, but she showed no sign of transforming, much to his relief. This group was believed to have been disbanded many years ago, but it seems like they've returned. Izuku continued. There's still a lot we don't know. None of the people we've identified as MLA members have been willing to talk. However, thanks to Shina, we do know a few things. Shina gave a nervous, awkward smile and a small wave. Most of the children didn't wave back, except for Kei, Fu, Yami, and Netsu. Kai wanted to wave back but he had no arms, with the rest of them giving her a hesitant look, causing Shina's already fragile smile to fade. I know that you may not have gotten off on the right foot, however, Shina wasn't herself at that moment, and she had valid reasons for doing what she did, Izuku said sternly, trying to wane away a bit of the tension between her and the others. And at the end of the day, she was a huge help in turning the tide of the battle. But regardless of all that, she's now part of the family, and I expect you all to treat her well.
Ok.
Kei, Netsu, and Kai gave an enthusiastic response while everyone seemed to be less so. Alright, back to what I was saying. Izuku sighed. Shina provided us with some valuable intel. Apparently, this new MLA have been in action for a very long time. Generations even. They've amassed a lot of power and influence, with many of their members being either very wealthy business owners or even politicians. They've inducted many children into their group from birth, attempting to brainwash them into believing in their cause, and some of the children with the more promising quirks are brought into special programs, with a select few being turned into child assassins. Another of which we've met. Ni's, the one Fu encountered. Sai felt like she was gonna be sick. She dispersed the HPSC, but at least they had the decency to wait until their specially picked out child soldiers were in their late teens before they started asking them to fight. It was disgusting. Using Shina's information, as well as my contacts with the police and the heroes, we're currently working on arresting a few dozen members of the MLA, some of which are those aforementioned wealthy or high-ranking ones, Izuku explained before giving a sigh. However, it's unlikely we'll catch many of them. News of this attack and its failure has already been spread, and with Tamura Shigaraki free, assuming his group is still communicating with the MLA, he's definitely going to tell them about Shina's betrayal, which will likely lead to many of the suspects fleeing before we can arrest them. And even then, that's likely not even a fraction of their forces. A feeling of unease spread throughout the children and the adults, to be honest. Shina in particular looked extremely unnerved. She'd hoped to have been of more use, but even after killing her forgetfulness, she could only really give them so much, which was actually so little. She knew there was so much more to the MLA that her handlers didn't tell her or show her, saying that she'd learn about it one day. Now she wished she'd dug a bit deeper and learned more while she was there. But the important part is, now the heroes are fully aware of the MLA's continued existence and will be looking into this matter extensively, Izuku said, to try and pick up the mood. As you can guess, the government is taking the existence of a powerful terrorist group hellbent on overthrowing them very seriously, and doing everything in their power to try and root them out. Now, as for what we'll be doing. Izuku sighed and looked back up at the house. Obviously we can't stay in the building for the time being. It's going to be under construction for at least a month. And we can't really stay at a hotel because of, well, Kai. Everyone looked back at Kai, who was looking down in shame.
Sozi.
It's fine, Kai, it's not like you can help it, Izuku reassured them. But due to this, we'll be camping out in the woods for a while. This received various reactions. Some like Netsu, Kyoku, and Kei seemed enthusiastic about the idea. Others like Eri, Kiba, and Fu didn't seem to care all that much. While some others such as Ken, Shiruku, and Nara seemed a bit upset at the notion of being out in the woods with no Wi-Fi. All except for Yami, Izuku said, looking right at the pale boy who looked back curiously. I'm currently making arrangements for Yami to stay in the city. And before anyone complains, the reason for this is because we lost a lot of Grim. Yami needs to gain a lot of negative energy in order not just to replenish the amount of Grim we lost, but to increase them. Because after today, I fully plan on drastically increasing the security, both using Grim and other elements I'm currently working on. While it's true that at the end of the day, all of you walked away without a scratch, that's only because of Eri and Shina. Had it not been for them, things could have ended much, much worse. Izuku looked down, his fist clenched as everyone around could feel the guilt and anger radiating off of him. As you all know, I hate the idea of having to send you all to fight off villains. I understand you're strong, I understand that many of you aim to become heroes one day, but right now you are children. You shouldn't have to worry about fighting for your life. And if the MLA is going to go after us, then I have to do everything in my power to make sure you all aren't harmed. I assure you, things will be different from here on out. After sending the children away with Sori to find a camping spot, Izuku stayed along with Sai to have a private conversation. Those things had multiple quirks. Sai cut to the chase, looking up at Izuku as he still sat on the stairs. Izuku nodded solemnly. It's quite possible that he is involved. We're not 100% sure, but... TCH, damn that man. Damn every inch of his foul body. Sai cursed, her clenched fist trembling in anger. Never in my life have I hated someone I've never met so much. I feel the same. Izuku agreed before sighing. But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. What I wanted to talk to you about was that girl you fought. You mean the one that claimed to be my daughter? Sai groaned while rubbing the bridge of her nose. Honestly, I have no idea who she is. Likely a child of one of my sisters, or even my brother. I have no idea how she could have gotten such a ridiculous idea in her head. Well, about that. Izuku looked away. You see, they couldn't identify her in any way, so they did some DNA tests and... Izuku didn't finish his sentence, instead of pulling a piece of paper out of his pocket and holding it out to her. Sai took it hesitantly, wondering what exactly was on that paper to get this kind of reaction. Then she looked at it and her eyes went wide. There was a long, long pause as Izuku just looked away from Sai, and Sai looked down at the paper in disbelief. This can't be right, Sai muttered in shock, her eyes as wide as dinner plates. Ivy never been pregnant before. I would know if I gave birth. And I know for a fact I couldn't have fathered the girl. I asked them to check it multiple times, Izuku assured her. But each time the results came out the same. But that's impossible. Sai continued to protest, looking at Izuku almost desperately. I've never even gone so far as to have sex before, let alone bring a child into the world. Well, the world is full of strange quirks that can make strange things happen, Izuku told her. Regardless, she is your biological daughter. Sai was speechless. She fell into an overwhelmed silence in response to the news, and so she just stood there with her mouth open for a while. After a few minutes of silence, Sai managed to compose herself, and she walked up the stairs, before taking a seat next to Izuku and rubbing her head. Who is the other parent? Sai asked, trying her best to sort out her thoughts and feelings. We don't know, Izuku explained. The second DNA signature is unknown. Likely whoever they are, they're not on the grid. Great. Sai groaned. I should also let you know that somehow, and I don't know how. Your mother found out about this. Izuku winced as he said it. Sai's eyes widened once more. Yeah, while I was speaking to the police on this matter, your mother showed up and asked that we discuss this matter. Izuku once again winced as he recalled how things went out. Meeting Sai's mother was an experience. She looked exactly like Sai, but bigger, in every sense of the word, and while Sai was stoic, this woman had an unrelentingly cold glare on at all times. It felt like she was trying to freeze Izuku with her eyes. I am so sorry. Sai shivered as she imagined how terrified Izuku must have been. But what exactly did she want? Well, she wanted to see if I could help reduce the girl's sentence to house arrest, Izuku explained. Specifically, she wanted to get the girl into her custody. What? Sai screamed in shock, jumping up to their feet. And I agreed. Izuku continued, wanting to just get through all this already. But why? Sai shouted out with a completely flabbergasted expression. She attacked you. Why would you agree to something like that? Well, I'll be honest, your mother paid me a lot of money, Izuku admitted, blushing a bit from embarrassment. Money I'm going to need in order to put all my plans into effect. And to be fair, from what I was told, the girl didn't even know she was attacking my facility. She just heard she'd get the opportunity to kill you and went for it. She didn't even know there were kids around. Sai took a deep breath and went silent again as she took some time to try and get her thoughts together. Are you going to need some time off to deal with this? Izuku asked with a voice full of trepidation. In truth, he really needed her help right now, but considering her situation, Izuku couldn't refuse if she asked for some time off. Sai shook her head. I can't. As kind as the offer is, I just started working here, and right now you're in a terrible situation. It wouldn't feel right to just leave. I'll make time for all this. Thank you. Izuku bowed his head in appreciation. I appreciate it very much. But with that said, I'm going to need you to stay with Yami in the city. Sori will stay here and guard the rest of us. Sai nodded. Understood. By the way, where are you sending Yami? He's going to be living with Amai and her family for the time being, Izuku explained. I already called them and discussed it, and they agreed rather easily. Apparently, her father's grandmother was quirkless, and so their family is viewing taking Yami as a stand against quirk discrimination. Which just about echoes the public's feelings about this. Oh? Sai raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Well, almost immediately after the attack, talking with DOC, once we confirmed the MLA's part in this, we agreed to spin this as an act of quirk discrimination, which it is, but we're basically making this out to be a statement rather than a petty grudge, Izuku explained. And so supporting me is considered to be a statement against quirk discrimination. So, you're taking advantage of the situation. Sai summed up. Izuku sighed, once again feeling a bit embarrassed. Yes. But I kind of have to. As I said, I have plans for increasing security, and none of them are going to be cheap. Already donations have increased by 75%. And I'm not the only one benefiting. Other anti-quirk discrimination groups are also likely to see a rise in donations, and hopefully, this might spark enough fire in the people to get some more progress going on this front. I do hope so. I don't understand why people must always find something to discriminate. Sai shook her head in disgust. Skin color, status, sexuality, there's always something. From experience, it's about 3 things, Izuku responded. First is superiority. Some people like the idea that they are just better than others. Even if it's over something small. The second is justification. People get angry, and they want to take it out on someone else, and they use discrimination as justification to hurt someone, simply to make themselves feel better. And third is handed-down teachings. Some people are taught since birth that some people are below them, and those people grow up, thinking that that's the truth. All that is the reason Kaken turned out the way he did. Sometimes I hate this species. Sai sighed. Byaararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararararar Izuku sighed. I can understand why. He then answered the phone and brought it up to his ear. Hey. So, we got all the camping stuff you asked for, as well as the special equipment.
Nami told him.
Now, as for the new child, you'll be taking care of.
Wait. Hold on a second.
Izuku shouted, his eyes widening as he jumped to his feet. You want me to accept a new kid now of all times? Yeah, it may seem like a bad time, but this one is a special case, Nami explained. And they might come with something you can use.
What the hell happened?
All for one sighed, rubbing his head to try and provide some relief for the horrible headache he was experiencing. First, his attack failed utterly and completely failed. All Might was still alive, no one died, they lost many troops, as well as their powerful Nomu, they didn't get a single one of the children, and he had to step in to save Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Overall, it was a mess. And now, he had to deal with a very pissed-off Redestro over FaceTime. The leader of the MLA was currently glaring daggers at him, he was seething with anger, and he could even see black spots from his quirk covering his face. Our attack failed. All for one answered. Simple as that.
Simple?
We lost good men in that attack.
And the government is now aware of our existence.
Redestro shouted in a rage. You're surprised? You should have known that would happen if we lost. All for one said casually. Surely you were ready to accept that consequence when you offered your assistance in my plans. You told me that you have powerful forces on your side.
That you had something capable of going off killing even All Might.
Redestro yelled.
That they had little to no chance of winning.
Yes, and everything I told you was correct. All for one nodded. However, little to no chance doesn't mean they have no chance. Even if something only has a 1% chance of happening, that still means it can happen. Not to mention, I told you that, not knowing that one of your own against would betray us and single-handedly turn the tide of battle in their favor. That made Redestro freeze, his eyes widening with shock.
I what?
That's right. Shigaraki informed me that he saw what was her name, Shinigami? He saw her fighting alongside Midoriya's forces. All for one explained. He also saw Achiko Uraraka using 100% of her power, something which is normally impossible for her, that airy girl freely using her quirk to completely revitalize her allies, something also normally impossible, and he was defeated by Izuku Midoriya, who was wielding a powerful quirk, again, something normal impossible. All of this was thanks to your child assassin. Redestro kept looking at the camera in shock for a minute before suddenly an enraged expression came to him and his face became covered in black. Ruh! Suddenly the camera went out as Redestro presumably started smashing things in his office out of rage. All for one side at the static-covered screen. To think that man is leading the MLA, I give them at most 2 years before they collapse. Things were going to get much more lively very soon. But for now he had to lie low. The heroes would be on high alert and he couldn't be too aggressive. At least not right now, especially while Shigaraki was still healing. For now he'd sit tight. But soon enough he would have All Might's head.
And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed.
If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video and support the original writer.
See you in the next video.